Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Monday, everybody. Hope everybody had a fun and relaxing weekend, but we are back with another day of awesome content here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Now, what we're diving into today, folks. Now, obviously, we know the national title game is tonight. In part two of today's show, we're going to be previewing that game like we would normally do, talk about the matchups, talk about different FanDuel odds, and then give our predictions for the game. But before we get there, in part one of today's show, we're going to sit down and discuss what Notre Dame does or what they need to do in order to win a title. We can finally turn the page over to 2026. The transfer portal is closed, as much as I'm sure we're all going to miss it. The transfer portal window is now closed, and we have a really, really, really strong idea of what this roster is going to look like moving forward. So we're going to have a discussion. Big picture, we're going to dive into more granular things throughout the offseason. After all, we have a ways until Notre Dame kicks off again against Wisconsin. And then we're going to wrap up today's show, folks, with a mailbag. So throughout the show, be sure to get your questions in. Joseph Parr's already getting a head start. He has his in MB for mailbag, or you can always put a mailbox emoji next to your question. Lets us know to get that set aside. But Brian, happy Monday, man. We got a lot to talk about today.
Yes, we do. I mean, so technically we still don't for sure know what next year's team is going to look like because the portal closed at midnight on Friday, but schools have basically 48 business hours to put kids' names into the portal, and that means we have until tomorrow. But we kind of have a good idea of it. I'm excited to kind of really start diving into the 2026 season. I know the championship game is being played tonight. Honestly, Trev, I don't even know if I'm going to watch it. I mean, people are asking, like, you going to do a live show? And I'm like, I asked the team yesterday, and they're like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. But if you want to do it, I'll do it. And I'm like, I don't want to do it. I was going to do it if you guys wanted to do it, because I'm so ready to turn the page on 2025 for a million reasons. And part of that is just my excitement about what this 2026 team can be. But for Notre Dame to kind of get to that point where they can build a championship football team, there's obviously some areas this program still has to grow and still has to develop and improve upon, which is why they didn't get a chance to play for the championship this year, as we will continue to say. Yeah, the committee screwed Notre Dame over, but Notre Dame's the one who did the things that put them in position to where the committee even had a chance to screw them over. And as Marcus Freeman said in his press conference last week, and Notre Dame fans have said, incessantly since then, which I love, is leave no doubt. I talked to somebody else who was like, if we can score 100, we're going to score 100. I mean, there's a lot of that coming out of this team, and obviously it has to continue, right? Like that sounds great now. Where's that in March? Where's that in June? Where's that in August? Where's that in, September, October, November? But we're going to look at it and say, boy, this team is really close. And somebody put a post on the board and they said, I think this team in 26 could be their most talented team in forever. And somebody said, yeah, we said that about 2025. And I'm like, and somebody else said, and I agreed with, yeah, and it was correct. I mean, this absolutely was Notre Dame's most talented team in a while. They didn't do what they needed to do to get it done. Their talent will not be an issue. Talent will not be the thing that keeps Notre Dame from winning a championship in 2026. We're going to talk about some areas, Trev, where we think Notre Dame has to really grow and build on top of already being kind of good in certain areas, right? But where do they need to grow? What are the keys to this team next year? Saying, okay, here's where we are. Here's where we need to get to. And if these things happen, this team's got a shot to be pretty special in 2026.
Absolutely. And some of the things that we talk about are going to be not just applicable to Notre Dame, but to any team that aspires to win a national championship. But big picture, it's some things that Notre Dame will have to work on, find different ways to correct. And then others are more specific to this team. So, Brian, getting us kicked off here, the first thing that we're going to talk about for what Notre Dame has to do to win a title, it starts with good health. And I know, again, that could be said with anybody, but Notre Dame has had higher volumes of injuries, especially along the trenches the last couple seasons. We've seen some very impactful players go down for Notre Dame over the course of the last 2 years. That's something that if Marcus Freeman is truly bought into winning a national title, which I believe that he is, that's something that's going to need evaluated and something that has to get from top to bottom. Practice schedules, what Lauren Landau has them do in the offseason. I mean, everything down to the studs and the cleats, right? And so those are some things that Notre Dame is going to have to be focused on, but good health and staying healthy for the regular season and in the postseason is going to be crucial.
It is. I mean, part of that's luck. Part of that's making sure the strength program has evaluated the injuries and why certain things happen. What's the issue with offensive linemen? Is it technique? Is it, what is the issue? And they've happened in different scenarios. Are they using the best knee braces on the market? I mean, different things like that for linemen. But I'm not saying like you're going to have injuries. You play 15, 16 games, you're going to have injuries. What I am saying, however, is like you've got to be able to evaluate it every year and say, why are we having these injuries? Is there something could be done? Is it our cleats? Say it's the field. I don't think that's the case. Guys have gotten hurt on grass practice field. Guys have got, I mean, the game where I saw more players go down with knee injuries than I've ever seen in my life was the 2024 Purdue game that was played on a grass field. So, Jordan Faison got hurt last year on a grass field, at Texas A&M, talking about 2024. So I don't know what it is. I don't pretend to know those things. What I can say is I can identify the problem. Now it's up for more qualified people to fix it. Another part of it too, Trevor, sometimes just good luck. I mean, it's not Lauren Landau's fault that Charles Jagasaw got into a vehicle accident that cost him a season. Like, just stuff happened.
Yeah.
But they need a little bit of good luck. And then part of that too is buy-in. Just they need good luck and lots of buy-in. Buy into the strength program, buy into the trainer program, buy into, being able to say, hey, look, we're doing this for our brothers. I'm doing this so that I can have, so I'm doing this for him. You're doing this for me. I find it hard to believe you can win a championship if your team isn't completely bought into the mission at hand. And honestly, we've seen teams win championships where that didn't happen right away. You look at Ohio State last year in 2024, that team didn't have complete buy-in the regular season, which is why they never looked like a championship team. They get into the playoffs, they have a sort of a come to Jesus moment as a team and have their player only meetings and all those type of things. And then the team that we saw in the playoffs looked nothing like the team we saw in the regular season. Notre Dame can't afford to do that. They're not going to get the benefit of the doubt of being a 10-2 team that gets in, as we just saw. They're a team that needs to have that buy-in from day one. And that doesn't start the first day of fall camp. It doesn't start the first game of the year. That had to have already started. I mean, they've been doing workouts for a week now. That needs to have already started. It's like, look, you had your offseason negotiations about your contract and all this other kind of stuff. It is what it is. We are where we are. Now we're one. Now we don't care about NIL anymore. We don't care about this anymore. We don't care about that anymore. We care about one thing and one thing only. And that's going out there and improving ourselves every single day and being completely bought into the mission, which is becoming the best football team we can be. That equals a national championship, in my opinion. I'll say it right now as we kick this show off. With all due respect to Texas's roster and Oregon's roster and Ohio State's roster and Indiana's roster and everybody, there is not a better roster top to bottom coming back in college football, in my opinion, than what Notre Dame will have in 2026. So now it's about you get to your full potential and the rest will take care of itself. And they need some good luck and from a health standpoint, but then they need complete buy-in. And that is a lot easier to accomplish now than it was 5-10 years ago because of the presence of NIL and social media and the portal and all those other type of things.
We've talked ad nauseum about it throughout this offseason so far is what is this team's mentality going to be after the snub? And there's really two different paths that you can take. And if, what you're hearing is correct and what we believe to be correct, man, you got to believe that this team is going to come out fired up and really, really unhappy with what happened. Now it has to be channeled in the right direction. And that's going to go into this buy-in. They elected to sit out of the bowl game because they're like, hey, it won't be the 2025 team. They took a lot of pride in doing that. They made that decision. I supported it at the time, still do to this day. But you need to make sure that all of that energy is channeled in the right direction for 2026. It can't be a detriment. You can't play so angry that you lose focus, but you have to be bought into the cause, to the big picture, the every week grind. It's easy to say, hey, I'm bought in when you're on the bus ride over to Lambeau Field against Wisconsin. Are you bought in April? Are you bought in week 2 of camp? Where this is the 20th day in a row that you're waking up at 5 a.m. getting ready to go to the trainer's room. Then you're prepping to go to film. And then you're going to have an hour and a half to 2 hours of practice. And then you're back doing rehab. Is that when you're bought in? those are going to be the big questions. That's when you have to fall back on your feelings of, Marcus Freeman talks about it all the time, and don't let go of the pain of that day of being left out of the playoffs. And so buy-in is going to be absolutely huge. And if they're able to channel that, I think this season is going to start off to a hot start, which honestly, Brian, is really the next thing that's up on this docket for us. And this is more Notre Dame specific.
Yeah, you got to find some September answers, right? You've got a September problem. You've got to find the answers to fixing that problem. And part of that is the schedule is set up a little bit better than it was in the past, or at least it was in 2025. Certainly than what it was in 2022. We had to start off with Ohio State. It's easier than 2024. We just had to start off at Texas A&M. But here's the deal, Trev. Your September problem in 2024 was not Texas A&M. It was not Louisville. It was Northern Illinois. You know what I mean? So the good news is I don't think this is necessarily a camp problem. There's these terrible things you're doing in fall camp that are causing your team to have those problems. The issues have been different in different years. Some years it was youth. Other years it was you were brand new to the system and brand new coaching staff in 2022, and you played a team in the opener that was just better than you were. I think what happened in 22 and 24, and we talked about it both years, Trev. 24, you were a part of those conversations. 22, you were not. But Vince and I and Ryan and I would have those conversations back in 2022, which was I said Marshall was a trap game because you were going to put so much into the Ohio State game, and that was a good Marshall football team, that if you won, you were going to feel really good about yourselves. And if you lost, you put so much into it, there's that dejected nature, and then you go out the next week and lay an egg. Well, we saw both of those things happen. We saw the dejected not being able to bounce back in 2022, and then we saw you're up in your feels a little bit in 2024 about how good you are because you just beat A&M by 10, and then you overlook Texas, you overlook Northern Illinois. That's where, football leadership comes from in the locker room. That's where maturity comes into play. This is a much older team in a lot of places, what's interesting is this is going to be one of Notre Dame's oldest teams under Marcus Freeman. And I'm going to actually sit down and look at that. But you look at it not just from an oldest from a age standpoint, because last year the receiving corps was old. You had a fifth-year senior and two fifth-year seniors in the receiving corps last year. But two of those fifth-year seniors were brand new to the program. Whereas this year, Jordan Faison's a senior, Jaden Greathouse is a senior, but they're now 4 years into the program. Cooper Flanagan's a senior. He's now 4 years into the program. Your offensive line is going to be more experienced than it's been the last 2 years. And, you look at your defensive line is now going to be a bunch of veteran players that have been, here for several years. Leonard Moore's now a junior. Tay Johnson's a junior. Don Schuler's a senior. Drake Bowen's a senior. These are guys that 2 years ago were the young bucks. And now they're all veterans. And so part of that is just football maturity, which comes from leadership. Part of that is the coaching staff having a plan in fall camp to not peak midway through fall camp, but to peak as you kind of get into the first week or two of the season. And those are all aspects of fixing the problem. But I also think something that should help a little bit is this is meant to be no disrespect to Wisconsin. It isn't. And I think even Wisconsin fans would admit this. But preparing all season to play Wisconsin is not the same as preparing all season to play Ohio State or Texas A&M or Miami, where you're literally putting all your eggs into, if you win that game, insert what will come of it. I mean, Notre Dame beat at Texas A&M last year, and literally that next week, I remember seeing 10, 15 different sports writers or sports analysts on TV and podcasts say, well, punch Notre Dame's ticket to the playoffs. Well, I mean, they were correct, but then the next week, Notre Dame gets beat by Northern Illinois, and then they're like, you don't deserve to be in the playoffs, that kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I think with having Wisconsin in the opener, your focus right now is not on beat Miami, beat Ohio State, beat Texas A&M. It's let's get ourselves where we need to be. The focus is even more so on just us. And when you look at the beginning of the schedule, it's Wisconsin week 1 in Lambeau. It's Rice in week 2. It's a home game against Michigan State in week 3. It's a road game against Purdue in week 4, at North Carolina in week 5. And, that's a good schedule, but it's not like you got to play your A game in weeks 1 and 2 in order to win, kind of like it was a little bit this year. And so I think that helps as well. Now, sometimes we see a team looks like something in September when they do start well, but they really weren't as good as we thought they were. They were just sort of beating up on inferior opponents, which we saw in 2023. I don't think this is a similar type of schedule. These are quality enough teams that they will give you a test. I also think this roster looks a whole lot different. Way fewer questions now than we had in 2023. And the other part of it too, Trev, is you're going to have a returning quarterback that's coming back, which Marcus Freeman addressed, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. But I think there are a lot of things about this team that are just naturally built to maybe overcome some of those September issues. But there are things that Marcus Freeman and his staff need to address about, are we going about summer the right way? Are we going about fall camp the right way to make sure we're better prepared to play good football in the month of September?
Absolutely. A fast start is going to be critical. And a lot of it comes down to focus. Some of it comes down to attention to detail. Love the points that you bring up about depth. I'll even take it a step further. The depth is also not just amongst the starters. The amount of depth in key rotation pieces is also better. There have been years, even under Marcus Freeman, where you look at the starting lineups or projected starting lineups. It's like, oh, okay, that guy started 8 games. This guy started 12 games. This guy started 22 games. That's great. Then you look behind it. It's like, okay, well, this is a true freshman. This is an incoming freshman. This is a redshirt freshman. This is a junior, but he's coming off of an injury. And now you have guys like, I look at the secondary. In previous years, going into 2025, your nickel rotation was either Carson Hobbs behind Devontae Smith, who had really never played nickel prior to this past offseason, and a true freshman in Dallas Gold. Now your nickel rotation this upcoming season is one of Dallas Golden. It could be one of the transfers. They could move some people around. You have experience at every level. Think of it the edge rotation. I think of it the wide receiving core. So there's a lot of things, to your point, pointing in the right direction to get them started off hot in September. One of those other things is going to be dominant play along the lines. That is something that is going to have to be, and not just for the month of September, that will have to carry over, but one thing that will help to getting off to a faster start in September and then carried on throughout the rest of the season is definitely more dominant play on the lines. We talked about it last week, man. It's something that's going to be imperative.
Yeah, we don't need to rehash that a ton again, but it does need to be reiterated, which is, I don't think this team can reach its full potential without at least one of the lines being elite and the other one being good, or both of them at least being very good. Even if not one of them's not neither's necessarily elite, if they're both very good, then you're fine. Like, I don't think Indiana's D-line is elite. I don't think it's like what Ohio State was last year or what Georgia was in 2021. I don't think it's that. I don't think their offensive line is elite. I don't think Miami's defensive line is elite. It is sometimes, and other times not so much, their offensive line is not elite. What they are is very good on both sides of the ball. You need at least one to be elite or both to be very good. For Notre Dame, there's no excuse for them both not to be very good. And Notre Dame hasn't had a very good offensive line since 2020. And that needs to change. Look, you're going into year 4 of Joe Rudolph's tenure. This is guys that have only been coached by you. There's nobody to blame if this unit doesn't live up to expectations. What does that look like? We'll have plenty of time to discuss that. And then, Al Washington did a great job of bringing the line up to the level it's played the last couple of years. And now they're on the verge of kind of being that elite unit consistently with the talent that they have coming in from the portal and the high school ranks. I mean, the 7 kids they're adding to the D-line roster this year is friggin' outstanding.
Nuts.
Keon Keeley, Francis Brew, Tion Gray, Rodney Dunham, Ebenezer Utade, Tiki Hole, and Elijah Golden is outstanding. Now it's up to Charlie Park to say, okay, Al Washington brought you here. He took over a line that was kind of like down here. It was solid. And then, you had a good player, but it was solid. And then you kind of rose it to here. And now they're asking Charlie Partridge to come in and take it to here. And, like that's going to be the thing he's tasked with. And with Joe Rudolph, it's like, dude, if not now, when? Right? Like, if you can't do it now, when's it going to happen? So I think that's imperative. Notre Dame has to be a line-driven program, not just because Marcus Freeman said he wants it, but because that's what you got to do to win at Notre Dame. You don't have Jeremiah Smith at boundary. I don't know that you have a Malachi Toney over there. I don't know that you don't have a Jeremiah Love in the backfield this year. Your offensive line has to carry you. Now, you do have a CJ Carr quarterback, but in order for him to play to his full potential, that unit has to play to its potential in front of him. Same thing. Look, I would say, and I think there'd actually be some agreement from some people nationally where they may say, hey, look, I don't know if they're number one, but they're in the conversation. I don't know that there's a team in the college football next year that brings a better back seven back to in the country. I mean, apparently it's so loaded that On Three didn't even feel the need to mention that Leonard Moore was a returning player. And they talked about Jalen Snead at linebacker instead of the guy that actually started at will linebacker last year, Jaden Alsbury. That's how loaded Notre Dame is. They don't have time to mention Leonard Moore, apparently. But I say that sarcastically. But, I mean, your cornerback room is as good as any in the country. Your safety room is as good as any in the country. Your linebacker room is as good as any in the country coming back. But those units can't play to their full potential if up front they're not doing what they need to do. And so that's still a big-time ingredient that's needed for this Notre Dame team to win a championship next year. If it's like this, the athletes are there, Trev. The talent's there. If the big boys up front on both sides of the ball play to their potential, this team is going to be really scary good in 2026. And look, you know what, man? I'm not even avoiding the hyperbole this offseason because I'm like, well, it's not hyperbole. It's just truth.
If the offensive and defensive line play to their potential this upcoming season, I don't know if they play a competitive game in the regular season. I truthfully mean that. With all the skill and talent coming back around them too, talent's not a question amongst either line. It is fair at certain spots on the D line and potentially at or one or two spots on the offensive line to talk about experience, potentially. But even then, if you're doing the job as a coach that you need to, I'm willing to rely on the talent. I'm willing to believe in the young, inexperienced talent. Like I'm willing to project onto Will Black's upside that he's going to be okay if he's in the starting lineup. I'm willing to, I know Armel has not played, a 200, 300 snap season. I'm willing to bet on the upside of a guy like him to get the job done, especially when you factor then into guys like Francis Brew, who played 484 snaps, are coming in. It starts with the lines. Couldn't agree with you anymore. One of the biggest reasons for the offensive line is because you have a returning starting quarterback coming back. That is such a huge piece and something that we haven't had in South Bend in half a decade. And that is such a huge piece. I don't know if you've seen it this morning, though, Brian, but CJ Carr is now the lone favorite on FanDuel to win the Heisman Trophy. It is now him. He is at plus 800, and Arch Manning is at plus 850. When's the last time Notre Dame had a preseason, off-season Heisman favorite at quarterback coming back? Brady Quinn.
And also returns the best cornerback in college football.
Right.
And also returns one of the premier edge rushers in college football. And also returns one of the top Mike linebackers in college football. Also returns arguably the best safety tandem in college football. Like, this isn't like he's that guy and the rest is like, oh, no. Like this is a unit that has the talent everywhere. But when you've got a quarterback that can elevate, like this is what we're going to find out about CJ Carr this year. Is he an elite elevator? I think we saw that to a degree last season. I mean, I think CJ Carr did some things last year where his decision-making and ability to throw the football allowed Malachi Fields to put on display some elite plays, even though his production wasn't as good as it was the year before because of the nature of the team and the fact that, they were running the ball as much as they were, spreading the ball around as much as they were. Malachi made highlight reel catch after highlight reel catch last year. His film from Notre Dame is going to be impressive, even though the numbers won't blow you away. And that's a lot of that CJ. I think CJ is an elevator. Now it's like, okay, you did it to this level last year. Now it's time to take it to this level. And CJ just continuing to ascend. And the thing is, it's not like, boy, he's raw, he's got a lot of potential, but he was pretty darn good last year. I mean, we're talking about a kid that in his first year as a starting quarterback finished in the top 5 nationally in passer rating this year. He was it was 5th behind Drew 0.063 behind Drew Mestamaker. He was like 1.4 behind Diego Pavia, and then also Julian Sain and Fernando Mendoza. He also last year ranked 3rd in all of college football behind Mestamaker and Mendoza, and tied with Diego Pavia in yards per attempt last season. And so he was already pretty good. So it's not like, he was okay. This isn't like Baylor asking DJ Lagway to go from talented but super raw and turnover prone young quarterback into a Heisman contender. That's not what we're asking him to do. It's not like asking Arch Manning last year to go in there and win them a championship as a first-year starter, or CJ Carr. Now these are guys that are proven, established players that are like, dude, you're here. Now it's time to take it here. And that's just it's not even about CJ saying, okay, I need you to make strides in year 2 that most year 2 quarterbacks don't make. It's like, dude, just make normal year 2 strides and you're arguably the best quarterback in college football. So I think his ascent is going to be incredibly important to Notre Dame being a championship team in 2026, because he's going to have to make those plays in the clutch moments against Miami and BYU and SMU, and he's going to have to make those plays in title game, the quarterfinals, the semifinals, the title games, where he doesn't have to throw for 350 yards. We talked about this with Mendoza. He didn't throw for a lot of yards, but man, he made those money plays when they needed to be made. Riley Leonard didn't always look pretty throwing the ball in 2024, but when a throw or a run or something, a play needed to be made, Riley made those plays. And same thing with Will Howard the year before that. That's what a championship quarterback needs to do.
And there's no Jeremiah Love or Jadarian Price in the backfield anymore. And I'm not trying to paint this picture that, they bailed out CJ. Not the case at all. I have now removed myself from the conversation. If he played really well for a redshirt freshman, he just played really well in relation to the other quarterbacks in college football in 2025. It's a really exciting spot for Notre Dame to be in. But with that being said, there were times this past season where it's like, okay, CJ's not feeling it today against USC. What happens? The running back room combines for 317 rush yards. Could they do that this year? Yeah, they have that potential. It's a very talented group coming back. But now the difference is last season in 2025, when you needed something to happen, you look at 4. A Heisman contender, the first ever Doak Walker Award winner in Notre Dame football history. You looked at 24, one of the most explosive running backs in the country. In 2026, they need something to happen. They need something to jumpstart the offense. Hey, 13, let's get it going. We got to start cooking here. And so that's going to be more of the responsibility that falls on his shoulders this year. But it's such an exceptional spot to be in when you have a guy like that coming back.
And what's impressive is he kind of showed that last year in his first 2 starts. I mean, that's kind of the crazy thing about CJ Carr when you really think about his performances last year. When you look at the Miami game, he makes the big mistake in the 3rd quarter that sets Miami up for a score. I think it was 21-14, and then he throws the pick. It was 21-14. He throws the pick. Miami goes down and gets a field goal. And what does CJ do on the very next drive? He goes out there and leads him right down the field, throws a beautiful back shoulder pass to Malachi Fields that sets up, a touchdown or a field goal, right? Makes it 24-17. The next drive, he shows great patience sitting in the pocket, finds Eli Raridan open for a big play, hits him down the field for a big play, and then 2 plays later, he runs for 3 yards. He then runs for 7 yards, puts him in the end zone. And so he did what he needed to do late in that game. And then you look a week later, Trev, and he made the interception throw to where he threw it over Jadarian Price's head, and then obviously that was a tough blow that allowed A&M to take a lead. But then what does he do when he comes out into the 3rd quarter? I mean, he leads them on a touchdown drive. A&M ties it up. Notre Dame takes a field goal. A&M goes and ties it up. So what does CJ do on the next drive? He comes out there, hits Eli Raridan for 13 yards, hits Malachi Fields for 20 yards, and then hits Will Pauling for 5, and then Jeremiah Love runs it in for a touchdown. I mean, he leads him right down the field for a go-ahead touchdown. I mean, looked calm, looked poised, and did what he needed to do. And so he's shown me that there's something to that. Now it's like, okay, clean up a couple of those mistakes here. But you think about how he looked going into the Arkansas game when that was the time was considered a big game. You know, they had just given Ole Miss and Memphis a run for their money, and he just comes out in that game. We keep being told, you know, this stadium, boy, you know, Arkansas this is one of the toughest places to play, and I don't know if you're, you know, blah 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 blah. And then CJ Carr just comes out there and makes them look like they're a JV football team in the first half of that football game. You know what I mean? So we saw some of that last year, but now it's like you said, it's about taking it to another level. And I think he can, and I'm looking forward to seeing him do it. And I think he'll have the weapons, but he needs to kind of be an elevator because you're going to have younger players that are still learning the game. Quincy Porter is a sophomore with 4 career catches. Mylan Graham's a redshirt sophomore with 6 career catches. Cam Williams has 1 career catch. Micah Gilbert has 9 career catches. You know, I mean, Elijah Burris has 3 career catches. There's a lot of talent there, but Logan Saldate has 1. Cooper Flanagan has 5. James Flanagan has none. You know, like you don't have a lot of experience behind Faison and Greathouse, and Greathouse is coming off a year where he caught 4 passes. So you do need to have a level of raising the bar that you need to raise them up, bring them up. That's what great quarterbacks do, is they bring everybody up to their level. And that's what we're going to find out about CJ.
Let's flip over to the other side of the ball here, Brian, because obviously you can have an awesome returning starting quarterback back and a lot of young, unproven talent, but super high ceiling on offense. But we say it a lot on this show. Defense gets you to the door. Offense brings home the ship. In order to get to the door, they're going to need their defense to play really like they did the final 7, 8-ish games of the regular season. And that onus falls on defensive coordinator Chris Ash.
Yeah.
And he's going to have to maintain what he did really in the second, third, and fourth quarter of the regular season.
Yeah. Trev, I'll let you do most of the talking here because I just spent the last kind of 20 minutes monopolizing the conversation. But look, we saw 2 Chris Ashes last year. We saw the one in the first 4 games who was trying to turn this defense into something it didn't need to be. And then we saw a coach in the last 7 games that bought into a mix of, hey, here's the things I'm bringing to the table, but this is what this group of players does well. Let me coach to their strengths. And when he did that, boy, it was nasty. Now in 2026, we need to see that second version of Chris Ash be the dominant presence from day one.
There are no more excuses in the way of, you know, he was learning his players, first year as a defensive coordinator. Okay, this is second year in your scheme. You have a returning middle linebacker who is an extension of yourself on the field. You have now experience at both end positions. You've brought in important portal acquisitions. You might have the most experience and best secondary in college football. To Brian's point earlier, most experience and best back 7 in all of college football, starting and potentially in the 2 deep. If he's able to lean into the things that made this defense so successful last year while maintaining, it's not an overcorrection. We saw a lot of overcorrection from this Notre Dame defense, really this Notre Dame team in 2025. If Chris Ash is able to maintain and continue to elevate what they were as far as a run defense, but then enhance some of the things that they do in the pass game, remain aggressive, stay focused, get hands on receivers, call games and insert and implement game plans the way that you did from Boise State on. Arkansas on too, I'll hear out that conversation too, but really from Boise State on, where we just saw a switch flip with this defense where it's like, hey, we take every single yard personal and mean it and implement the game plan that way. Because I'm sure they took yards personal against Texas A&M, but the product on the field didn't look that way. So what they're going to have to do is maintain that mindset for a 14, 15, 16 game season. That's what is at stake for Chris Ash this upcoming season. Because to your point, Brian, we saw 2 different versions, but we saw enough of the elevated version that I'm willing to say that, hey, this is who you should be. You've shown that you were this for the majority of the season. There was a time last year in 2025 where we were like, hey, the Arkansas performance is the outlier. You weren't great in situation key moments against Miami. You weren't great at all against Texas A&M. You let Purdue put up 23 first half points on you. The Arkansas game's now the outlier. Hey, Boise State was nice, but we need to see you do it again. It's easy to scheme up an aggressive game plan against a team that comes out predominantly in 12 personnel. What are you going to do against NC State? Okay, hey, we saw it against NC State, but Jade Mailata, Lincoln Riley, Makai Lemon, it's a different beast than NC State's offense. What do you do there?
Yep.
And then we saw them stack performances. If you carry over how you were from Boise State on into the 2026 season and take every yard personal and be intentional about the game plans, utilize the talent the way that they should be used, this defense is going to be absolutely filthy in 2026 if it starts at the top.
100%. I mean, this is all going to be about, does Chris Ash, and this is more of a criticism of just coordinators in general. This isn't necessarily a 100% direct shot at Chris Ash, although I feel he could fall victim to what a lot of coordinators fall victim to, which is don't make this about you. Don't make this about what you want to do, what you think is best. Do what you want to do and what you think is best, with the number one foundation of your philosophy being, what do these players do well? You've got an elite edge rusher coming back. You've got another kid on the other side who has elite potential in Bryce Young. You've got guys up the middle who can rush the quarterback. You've got linebackers that can blitz well. You have big-time man cover guys in the secondary. Yes, I know that you like to be more of a zone guy, but don't be that guy that says, yes, I know I have elite cover players, but we're going to go play a lot of zone because that's what I do. Please don't be that guy, because this team has so much potential that if you lead them the way that you did in the second half of the season, this defense can be in a championship defense, and then continue to recruit 6'3" corners that you can eventually be a great cover 3, cover 4 team in. That's fine. Whatever. I mean, I don't love it, but I've seen teams that play a ton of zone be really good on defense. But you've got the best cornerback in college football coming back next year. If you're using him to play a lot of cover 3, a lot of cover 4, that's dumb. It just is. You've got a very athletic front seven coming back. If you're going to use them to slow flow, read and react to the football all game, because that's what you can do to put NFL tape on your resume to get an NFL D coordinator job, this defense won't be as good as it needs to be. It'll still be – look, the way I look at it, Trevor, there's no way this defense isn't a top 10 to 15 defense next year, just on talent alone. But is that good enough to win a championship? Is that getting the most out of this unit? I don't think it is. There's no excuse for this not to be a top 5 defense next year. And if Chris Ash is able to lean into what do we do well, now let me scheme up the opponent based on what our kids do really well, based on the talents of our team, then the run defense will be as good, if not better, than it was this year. And I know you're working on an article talking about that. Like, it was a necessary change. That was a huge aspect to it. And pass game wise, I don't need Notre Dame to rank top 5 in passing yards allowed like they did the previous couple years. There's going to be a give and take. You know, it's just the way that it is. Having said that, because they don't play a predominantly Big Ten schedule like Ohio State did a couple years ago, where nobody really throws the ball very well. But you're also going to be outscoring people by a lot, and so teams are going to be throwing the ball a lot more in the second, third, and fourth quarters. It's more so about being aggressive, being disruptive, shutting down the run game, forcing a lot of turnovers, forcing a lot of incompletions. And, yeah, okay, he hit this big play, hit that big play. That came after he threw 2 picks, and we jumped on him by 30 points. Fine. Good job hitting a 60-yard touchdown pass when we were up 45-17. Okay, whatever. That's the big key. Chris Ash is going to play such an important role in whether or not this team can win a championship. And it's about coaching to the strengths of my players first and foremost. If he does that, this defense is going to be special next season. And he'll be a driver of that success.
Another key aspect, and something that I'm also going to be writing about, Brian, is situational football. One common pattern that we've seen from national championship winners year over year over year is that they are dominant in situational football. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about third down, in the red zone, winning the turnover margin, the middle 8, starting fast, Those are all ingredients to playing really dominant situational football. One of the reasons why Notre Dame went on the run that they went on in 2024 is they absolutely dominated the middle eight. In the games where they struggled, they did not win the middle eight. They didn't win the middle eight against Miami this year. We know how that turned out. Didn't win the middle eight against Ohio State in the national championship game. We know how that turned out. Winning the middle eight against Penn State was a huge driver into what turned that game around in Notre Dame's favor. Dominated the middle eight in the Sugar Bowl against Georgia. It was a 13-point win. Dominated the middle eight against Indiana. At one point, that game was 27-3. So there's a lot of different things that fall into this. And turnover margin isn't just getting turnovers. It's both sides of the ball here, taking care of the football, not fumbling in the red zone, not throwing unnecessary interceptions down in the red zone, killing drives. Situational football is going to be absolutely huge for this team in every sense. Every sense.
Yeah, I mean, think about this, Trev. Notre Dame last year, this is a wild statistic. Notre Dame last year had the number, what was it? Let me pull it up here because it's changed a little bit since the postseason. Notre Dame is going to finish third in college football, maybe second in college football, depending on what happens tonight with Indiana in points per game. I'm going to say that they were the second best scoring offense in Power 5 because I'm not going to punish Indiana because they didn't score 42 points in the title game. Like Notre Dame didn't have to play in the postseason. That's all regular season numbers. You know, so, and it was the most points you've scored since 1912. You set a new program record in yards per play, beating the record that Mike Denbrock had already broken in 2015 by a lot, by 0.3 this season. And so like there you were already like a great scoring offense and you did that. This is a crazy stat. You did that, Trevor, with a offense that ranked 118th in red zone offense. 118th in red zone offense. Now, they were a little better when it came to scoring touchdowns. They were 21st, but that 21st, I'm actually going to see if I can find, is there a way to do it in regular season? Because there are some teams that didn't do well in the postseason that dropped that down a little bit. But they were, 21st in touchdown percentage is okay. But imagine if they were top 10 in touchdown percentage and then just top 30 in overall scoring, overall red zone. Think about what their numbers would look like. And it wasn't, you had the 70-point game against Syracuse that popped that up a little bit. But here, I'll do some data for you here, Trev. We'll just, be honest about that. So you had 504 points, scored 70 against Syracuse. The other 11 games, Notre Dame still scored 39.5 points per game. So even if you take the best game you had, 70 points away, you're still sixth in the country in scoring offense. That's really good. So actually, let's not take that game away. So let's go 504 minus 70. Let's say they score a normal blowout victory over a team like that. Let's say they score 49 points.
Yep.
Okay. That now they're at 40.3 points per game. So let's take away like the defensive touchdowns and the block punt early. You get 49 points is what they get. They're still at 40.3, which would rank them fourth in college football. Fifth behind North Texas, Indiana, Utah, and USF. So imagine what they could do if they were a better red zone team. Imagine how good this defense would have been or how good this team would have been if they simply could have had one stop either at the end of the second quarter or the beginning of the third quarter against Texas A&M or Miami. We're having a very different conversation about this season. Situational football is something where this team has got to get a lot better. They were pretty good last year on third down. Notre Dame was 13th in the country last year on third downs. The defense was 35th, which is a little lower than I'd like it to be. But, it was still good. The red zone defense last year was 68th in red zone defense last year, Trev, and 47th in red zone touchdown defense. This team had one of the most dominant point differentials in all of college football this year, and they sucked in the red zone on offense, and they weren't that much better on defense. Imagine if they can improve in those two areas. Just those areas. how dominant this team is going to be next year.
Yeah, man. I mean, that answers the question because some people just look at those stats big picture and say, well, they averaged 42 points a game, scored the most points per game that they've had in a season since 1912, set yards per play records. How much better can they get? That's the window in. That's how they continue to get better. Now, that also doesn't mean we're not sitting here saying if they get better in the red zone, they're going to average 51 points a game. That's not what we're talking about. That's not the conversation that we're having here. But that's the difference between being a contender and being a champion, is those fine details right there, because there's a lot of other things. In previous years, Brian, we're having conversations about, okay, how do they increase their points per game? This offense has to get more efficient. How do they go from 6.4 to 7.3 yards per play? It's a big gap. What do they do? Those boxes have been checked.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's about fine-tuning those details, because those teams that are competing and winning national championships, they've closed those gaps. They've taken the necessary steps to say, okay, how do we go from 50th in the red zone to top 30? To win a national championship, you don't have to rank first in every single category that we evaluate each week. You don't have to be. But there's key areas of improvement that this team has to focus on. And those are huge. I'm with you. I mean, shoot, I imagine a world of what if they were even like just top 50 and just not 118th in the red zone? What would that have looked like? I mean, goodness gracious. I mean, we're talking the same thing about the pass defense. It's like, hey, this talent-wise, they have the potential to be a top 10 pass defense in the country. What do they look like if they're just top 50, just not 124th? I mean, that's a lot of room for improvement still, man.
So, Trev, I'll give you a little something I was adding up here while you're talking. So, last year, Georgia Tech was tied with Connecticut for 31st in college football in red zone offense. 31st. Georgia Tech and UConn. That's it. 31st. They had the same number of red zone trips as Notre Dame. 55. And they both had 49 scores in those situations. So they're tied for 31st. If Notre Dame simply just tied Georgia Tech and UConn, and in 4 of those drives ended in field goals and only 3 ended in touchdowns. So this isn't even a huge improvement, just 4 field goals and 3 touchdowns, and tied Georgia Tech and UConn for 31st in the country. Their points per game average last year would have been 44.8. Like,
wow.
I mean, that leads the country of Power 4 teams by over a couple yards or a couple points. That's just getting to be mediocre, solid, not even top 30 in red zone offense. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean,
so this is what I kind of, when I laugh when people are like, "Oh, Mike Denbrock, I'm not sold on him." I'm like, if you're not sold on him, then bro, you're just not someone who can be happy. Yeah, but the red zone. Yeah, the red zone needs to get better. But imagine how scary good it would be if it was better. It's not like we're asking the red zone offense to get better in a year where they scored 31 points a game. Right. That's my point. Yeah, he's got to do a better job of getting the red zone offense going. No question about it. But let's not allow that to trump the fact that this is the greatest scoring offense we've seen in any of our lifetimes. Because last I checked, there aren't any Notre Dame fans that were alive and watching football in 1912. So now it's about taking it to that next step where you can do it in the big games. That's the big thing. It's not even about points per game. It's about, can you do it in the big games? Can you do it against Ohio State in the playoffs? Can you do it against Georgia in the playoffs? Can you do it against Oregon in the playoffs? And in teams like that where your defense benefits from the fact that the opponent knows they have to take some chances early if they're going to keep up with you because your offense is getting to 30. You know, I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about, and that's how you put teams away. And, you know, it all goes down to just improving in the red zone. Literally, if that's the only improvement Notre Dame makes, if they're the same offense they were this year, next year that they were this year, except for one area, red zone success, and they just ranked 30th in red zone success, this team is going to be unbelievably dominant on offense.
100%. 100%. Very hard to stop. Another aspect of this offense that would make them hard to stop is the final point that we're going to talk about before we switch over to part 2 of the show. a breakout from a pass catcher this upcoming season. We've seen in postseasons before, dating back to the 2015 Alabama season when O.J. Howard comes out of nowhere in the postseason and just puts up monster numbers. Or there are some teams that just kind of have that guy all year long. Brock Bowers for Georgia. Obviously we talk a lot about the LSU wide receiver core, what Jeremiah Smith was for Ohio State in 2024. Notre Dame is going to need a pass catcher to break out this season to get them over that hump.
Yeah, and I don't need Notre Dame to have a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson. I don't need them to have a Devontae Smith. I don't even need them to have a Jeremiah Smith type of talent. What this is about is, do you have a guy that in big games steps up and is that kind of go-to guy? And we saw Jaden Greathouse kind of emerge. Look at the impact he had late in 24 with him stepping up and being huge. We all remember the wide open play where he juked the guy at the line, but a lot of people forget. Do you remember the 3 absolute money third down catches he made, including the ridiculous back shoulder on the slot fade he made on a 3rd and 9 that helped Notre Dame kind of get back in that game? So but you need that, Trev. You need that kind of impact. You need that kind of production in big moments, and CJ Carr needs to have some guys that he has complete faith in, that in this moment, I'm going to go to this guy. And I felt like last year that guy was in those big moments was primarily Malachi Fields in those big moments. He went to Greathouse late in the games and a couple times against Miami and A&M. Maybe that happens here as well, but that's a big thing, is somebody's got to step up and be a dude. They don't have to be Jamar Chase. They don't have to be Devontae Smith, but they've got to be impactful. And in an ideal world, Trev, it's a few guys step up, and then it just who that guy is varies game to game. But you've got to contend with multiple guys. But there's got to be that at least one that steps up and says, "Hey, this is me." And with all due respect to Jordan Faison, it can't be him, because for Jordan's already proven he can be an impact player. But I'm not asking a 5'10" guy to be that guy, because I don't want him to be that, okay, now he's got to go win that back shoulder throw. He's got to do this. It's got to be somebody else that complements what Jordan's already doing. Now, if he does take his game to another level, that's great, and it can have that impact. But I'm more so about looking at it from the standpoint of, okay, Jordan already broke out. He just needs to keep doing what he's doing. Now it's about somebody else also stepping up.
I think of it like this, Brian. I'll use a basketball analogy here. Who is going to be that person that steps up in Notre Dame's pass catching core, where game's on the line, shot clock's winding down, this is your last possession? Who do you get the ball to? I could be as high as I want to on CJ Carr. He can't throw it to himself. He can't go make that play himself. Who steps up? Is it Cooper Flanagan? Is it Jaden Greathouse? Is it Quincy Porter? Is it Mylan Graham? Is it Cam Williams? Is it Micah Gilbert? But somebody has to emerge as that kind of go-to fail-safe guy, and we saw Malachi Fields do that. What did they start doing to get the offense going against Miami? They stopped throwing quick little bubble screens and RPO reads to Jordan Faison, and they're like, what are we doing here, guys? We have a 6'4", 223 boundary receiver that might be the best contested catch guy on either one of these teams, arguably in the country, outside of 4 at Ohio State. Hey, let's start taking some shots with this guy one-on-one. Freeman even said it. He said when Malachi and Jaden Greathouse are one-on-one, they're open.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be the mindset going into this season. But somebody's going to have to earn that. That's the biggest thing that we're talking about. It can't just be, well, I mean, Quincy Porter's 6'4", so I guess it could be him. I watched 6'1" Jaden Greathouse cook guys in the semifinals in the national championship. That's going to be absolutely huge. I'm with you, but a pass catcher is going to have to emerge. And there's varying degrees to it. Roman Wilson's emergence in the playoffs for Michigan in 23 looked a heck of a lot different than what Jamar Chase did. Well, you could argue that their impact was the same. Statistically, it looked different. But Roman Wilson and Colston Loveland, guys like that, gave J.J. McCarthy a go-to target in crunch time in the Rose Bowl against Alabama. It all looks different. But it's something that is definitely a non-negotiable for this year. I'm with you. I'm with you completely. Well, folks, that is going to do it for part 1 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to preview the national championship game. But before we get there, please be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're talking about the national championship game tonight, which features the number 1 seeded Indiana Hoosiers versus the 10th seeded Miami Hurricanes. Now, this is taking place down in Miami Gardens, so I guess some people are looking at it like a home game for Miami. Unfortunately, since they're the lower seeded team, they're going to be hanging out in their own visitors' locker room, which is an interesting twist on tonight's game. But this does kick off 7:30 p.m. You can watch it on ESPN. It'll be inside of Hard Rock Stadium. As things stand right now, obviously lines will always change leading up to kickoff, but we've already seen some movement. Right now on FanDuel, Indiana is now 7.5-point favorites. Over-under is set at 47.5 for this one, Brian.
It's a fascinating game, Travis. It's only the 3rd time these two teams have ever met. The last time that Miami and Indiana played each other was 1966. I don't know that anybody had that. Like, I haven't heard anything about like, hey, this guy predicted these are going to be the two teams playing for a championship. You know what I mean? So I think this is a fascinating game. I saw somebody in the chat said Indiana winning would be the worst things for college football. I think that's nuts. I think it'd be awesome for college football. And I don't know that as a Notre Dame fan, I love it. It might be a bad thing for Notre Dame, depending on how you look at it. But I think it's great for college football. You've got an up-and-coming program against a program that's won championships in the past. You have the new aspect of Indiana versus is the you back kind of thing, kind of like what they were talking about with Notre Dame last year. And it's a two very just who saw this coming? Who saw this coming? And you go back to Miami, can they win big games? Can they do this? Can they do that? And their season starts with a win over Notre Dame, which is what made their season. Like, that's still to this day, I think, the biggest one they've had all year, because it's the best team they've beat all year, in my opinion, with all due respect to Ohio State. But to your point, though, they did beat Ohio State also. They did beat Ole Miss also. They did beat Texas A&M on the road also. This isn't like, remember the year Michigan made it to the championship game in basketball? It wasn't the team with Trey Burke and all those guys. It was like the other team. And like, they never played anyone higher than a 7 seed until the title game when Villanova smacked them. They just kind of got lucky that a bunch of higher seeded teams kept getting upset every week. This isn't that. You had to beat the number 2 seed. If you're looking at Miami, you had to go on the road and beat the number 7 seed. You beat the number 6 seed. Indiana had to, beat the mighty. Nobody does 4th downs in the 4th quarter against bad teams as well as Alabama. And Indiana had to overcome that Alabama's so good that they impressed the committee in a 21-point loss in their conference title game. That's how good they are. And Indiana beat them by 35. They played an Oregon team that a lot of people thought, boy, this team is legit. Smoked them in the in their quarterfinal game or semifinal game to get to the championship, and they've earned it. They had to beat Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. They had to beat Oregon on the road and on a neutral field this season. So they've both earned their way here. There's no question. Well, they didn't have to go through Notre Dame. Well, Miami's kind of part of the reason Notre Dame didn't get in. So they've earned their right to be here, and so I'm looking forward to seeing how it goes. I love that. We'll dive into the matchup here next, Trev. But I think this is a good storyline. I think it's, if you're someone who doesn't love the transfer portal the way that it is, I can understand why you might not like this game, because both of these teams had a major impact in the transfer portal. But I'd also like to remind you, there's a lot of players on Miami's roster who are some of their best players: Malachi Toney, Francis Maunoa, Ruben Bain, Akeem Misador, Justin Scott, who were recruited out of high school by Miami.
Yeah.
So Mark Fletcher is another one. Elijah Lofton, I believe, is another one. So I like it. You know, I think this is a good matchup. We're going to have an interesting conversation about how Notre Dame in 2026 could be the team that, like, look, college football is like anything else. It's a copycat league, right? So you're seeing teams have success in the portal. You know, Ohio State 1 year's more homegrown than they have portal add-ons. And then Indiana, if they win it this year, they're built exclusively through the portal. And then, you know, you're always going to have this, you know, could Notre Dame sort of be next year's Ohio State, or is it going to be somebody that went out and had a big portal class? You know, we're going to talk about those things this offseason. It's going to be a lot of fun. And so I think this is going to be it's a very intriguing matchup, and I think both teams deserve the right to be here, and they're built differently, but this is the new rules in college football. And I'm not one of those people that begrudges Kurt Cignetti for following the rules to build a team that can make it to the championship game. Oh, he brought a bunch of transfers with him from James freaking Madison, guys. He didn't come here from Bama or Georgia and bring all those guys with him. You know, he brought it from James Madison. So I think it's great. I think it's great.
Taking my Notre Dame hat off, these are two great storylines.
Mm-hmm.
It is. Now, with my Notre Dame hat on, I've openly said that this was my doomsday scenario. I would have loved an Oregon versus Ole Miss national championship game. It would have been an easier pill to swallow for me that Oregon winning its first national championship in program history before I got to watch a Notre Dame national championship in my lifetime is an easier pill to swallow. Now, some of that is I grew up in Indiana. I've been around Indiana fans. I now live in Indy. I'm an hour away from Bloomington. So a lot of different things that factor here. But if I take my Notre Dame hat off for a second, it is one of those where it's like, okay, is Miami finally back? I'm a big believer that certain brands, the sport in general, is better when certain brands are better. In the NFL, you have, your OG teams. I think the NFL is better when teams like the Bears are better because it's just one of those original brands. In college football, the sport is better when teams like Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, teams like that are better because those are your flagship teams when you think of the sport. And I would also consider Miami to be one of those for their dominant run in the 80s, for that spectacular 01 team. They're the U. It's a big brand. And right now they're kind of carrying the weight of Florida on their back as far as, being relative in the sport. Florida is going to catch
being
up
good
soon.
At football.
Exactly. Exactly.
They're carrying the state for being good because nobody else in the league in the state is good.
Yeah.
I mean, your next best team in the state's what? South Florida?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it's the U and the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
With goofy Liam Cohen as their head coach. But in all seriousness, the storylines are great. And then with Indiana, what do you love more in sports than perennially the worst team in the sports history? First team to 700 losses.
People are so against that. It's the weirdest thing to me. Is it like envy? Is it jealousy? I think it's awesome that a program that's been a perennial doormat has been able to ascend to where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a great story.
Yeah.
I'm completely flummoxed looking at the chat. Some of the people that are like just seem to hate Indiana. I do not understand that. That kind of, yeah, and I get it. Cignetti is annoying. Is he any less annoying than Mario Cristobal?
No,
not to me. So, yeah, I think it's a great storyline. I think you nailed it, Trev. Take your Notre Dame hat off for a second. These are two great storylines.
Absolutely.
Two great storylines. And teams that had to earn their way here. And that's what I love about the 12-team playoff and what I'm hopefully eventually get to see in a 16-team playoff is the eras of only 4. This is why I think this I didn't think I was going to like it better, but now I do. In the past, we'd be sitting here like, man, that team, I think that team could have beat anybody. Second year in a row that one of the teams that made it to the championship game would not have been in the previous format. I still contend that Notre Dame would have gotten in the old format because I think they would have jumped Notre Dame ahead of Penn State in the old format. I don't think they would have kept Penn State and Texas both ahead of Notre Dame in the old format. They did that now because they didn't have to. It didn't matter. But let's just say that Notre Dame doesn't get in. Both last year's championship teams weren't in the top 5. And this year, Miami comes in at number 10. But you could argue, as we did, that at the end of the year, Miami was clearly one of the 10 best teams in college football and had played as such. And so that's what I love about this new format is there's no more easier paths being created because teams got in who had easier schedules or whatever. I mean, this year's playoff would have been it would have been what? Ohio State, Indiana, Georgia, and Oregon. I mean, did you had what? Those teams went what? Other than went 2-3 in the postseason, right? Georgia lost their first game. Ohio State lost their first game, and Oregon went what? 2-1. So 2-3, or no, not Oregon. Texas Tech. It'd have been Texas Tech. Yes, it'd have been Indiana, Ohio State, Georgia, and Texas Tech. So those teams outside of Indiana would have gone what? 1-3, 0-3, actually 0-3.
Yeah, wow.
In this year's playoff, 0-3. Those would have been the top four, So I dig it. It's proof that the system is working structurally, even though we don't agree that the system is broken in regard to who they put in. But I want to turn this into a Notre Dame thing. I think what it does show the last 2 years has shown is this is why the expanded playoff is good, because the cream will eventually rise to the crop or to the top in those situations, because teams have unequal schedules. Texas Tech's schedule is far different than what Miami's was this year. They didn't have to play Notre Dame in the opener. They didn't have to, you know what I mean? They didn't have to go on the road and play a team like Oregon. You know what I mean? And so I think the cream rises to the top. And we saw that again this year, just like we did last year.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, having the opportunity to prove it on the field means everything. Miami's journey to the title looked a heck of a lot different than IU's journey to the title. Indiana went undefeated in the regular season. They won their conference championship. They got the number 1 overall seed, beat the brakes out of Alabama, and then beat the brakes out of Oregon, and then here they are. Miami didn't even finish in the top 3 of their conference. They didn't play for the conference title. They had 2 unranked losses in the regular season, and then they had to go on the road to a higher-seeded team. Then they had to play Ohio State, the reigning defending champs, in the quarters, and then they had to go and beat a very high-powered Ole Miss team in the semifinals. So it all looked different, but what that shows me, Brian, is that all of the preconceived notions that get built up over the course of an entire offseason of like, we know the quality of who's going to win it because of the strength of the regular season. Well, Indiana proved that doesn't mean anything. Like, one ranked opponent all year. Then it also debunks it, and I would argue that Notre Dame has done this first, but just in pertains to this year. If you lose to an unranked team, let alone 2, you shouldn't even get in because you're not a contender. Well, Miami lost to 2 unranked teams, and here they are playing for the title. There are a lot of really good storylines in this game if you're able to take off your Notre Dame hat, and that's going to be absolutely huge. Absolutely huge.
Let's dive into the matchups a little bit, Trev. Let's kind of get into the specifics of the game. Look, these are 2 teams that got here differently, but are found and look different schematically, especially on offense. But they're also 2 teams that at the heart of who they are is the same. Indiana's more up-tempo. They throw the ball downfield more. They've got the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. They've got some NFL players in the secondary, but they're still at their core a team that wins in the trenches. Miami's a different team. They try to throw sometimes. They realize that they're ground and pound. They play great defense. At the end of the day, Malachi Toney, Mark Fletcher, Carson Beck, all these guys get all the love. They're still a team that's built in the trenches. They're here because of what they do in the trenches. And I think that's right there. That's where a lot of this game is going to be won. Can either team gain an advantage in the trenches? Now, if there's a stalemate in the trenches, then you say, okay, well, who's got the playmakers and who's better coach team? I think that, in my opinion, favors Indiana a little bit. So when you look at Indiana, you can't get beat in the trenches. That's the thing that can negate what I believe to be are some of your advantages from a scheme standpoint, a personnel standpoint on the perimeter. If you're Miami, you have to dominate it. You have to, I don't say dominate. You have to definitely win the battle in the trenches if you're going to stay in this game. You've got to be able to establish a ground game against them. You've got to be able to shut down Indiana's run game. When Indiana's offense has struggled this year, there's been a very common denominator in those games, and that is that they struggle to run the football. Every single time they struck that they now there's been games they didn't run the ball that great and they still scored a lot of points, but more often than not, in the closest games they played, Iowa, 104 yards rushing. Oregon, which was a competitive game for most of the game, they only rushed for 111 yards. Penn State's the game they needed to come back and win. They only rushed for 108 yards. Wisconsin, they won 31-7. It was 10-7 at halftime. They only rushed for 83 yards. They only beat Ohio State by 3 points, 13-10 in the Big Ten title game. They only rushed for 118 yards. They scored 38 against Alabama and 56 against Oregon, and they averaged 200 yards per game in those two games. You know, Illinois, they ran for 312 yards, blew Illinois out in that game. Teams that have been able to shut down their run game have kept the points down against Indiana. That's key number 1, 2, and 3, in my opinion, for Miami. Put the pressure on Fernando Mendoza to carry you. And that's the exact same recipe that Indiana is going to have for Miami. But I think when we first look at it right there, for Miami, that's the key, number 1. Ground and pound them on offense and stop their run game on defense. You do that, this is going to be a ball game. If you don't do that, this is going to look a lot like what a lot of Indiana's other games have looked like.
Absolutely. If you're a fan of trench warfare, you were absolutely going to love this game. One of the other reasons why I also wanted it to be Oregon versus Ole Miss is there's a chance that that game could have been a barn burner. I'm not naive to the fact that this one could be, but I'm not putting any money on it. And there's a reason why the over-under is 47.5. Now, that being said, I love the storyline here. What takes the day? Which one is going to come out up front? Is it the day 1, day 2 NFL draft talent of Miami, or is it the gritty, extremely well-coached trenches of Indiana? Because you can look at it two ways. Like, hey, look, they're just well-disciplined. I don't know if Indiana has a single first-round or even second-round NFL draft pick.
I was just thinking Miami's got a whole lot more day 1 and day 2 draft picks in their lines than Indiana does. But Indiana's coached extremely well, and they're very old. That's where the age of this team has benefited them the most, is in the trenches. Absolutely. That doesn't mean that they're average players that are just older. Because here's the deal. If you're average at 21, you're going to be average at 25. You know what I mean? But the point is, they're good players that are maximizing their potential because of being older, but also great coaching. Where Miami's coaches are more working with Francis Maunoa is a first-round talent. Ruben Bain's a first-round talent. Marquez Bell may be a first-round talent. Akeem Misador is probably a first-round talent. Justin Scott's a first-round talent. That's the difference between the two, but they're both here playing very similar when it comes to the desire to win in the trenches.
Absolutely. The thing working in Indiana's favor for this game, and I also think the key to Indiana winning this game is also won or lost in the trenches because of how strong and how big Miami's offensive and defensive fronts are. But what Indiana does and where that age really comes to play a factor is they play so well as a unit. Miami, they have a lot of really good individual talent, and where they get into trouble sometimes is when they don't communicate as well. The blitz pickups, the stunts pickups for Alabama's offense or for Indiana's offensive line is spectacular. Defensively, when they run twists and stunts, it is timed up perfectly. They play so well as a unit because a lot of people just look at it on paper. We've seen people do it in this chat. It's a bunch of 2-star guys. You told me a 6'1", 245-pound guys going up against Markel Bell. Yeah, I'm telling you that's the case because their stunts are timed perfectly. Right. They complement each other so well. So for Indiana, you can't let Akeem Mesidor and Ruben Bain take this game over because this is the best defensive line that you will have faced from top to bottom your entire season. Now, luckily for Indiana, they've played some good defensive lines. That doesn't mean that Miami's the best and everybody else sucks.
Right.
You got to play against Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry and the McDonald kid at Ohio State. You got to play against Mateo Uiagalelei and some of those guys at Oregon. You got to play against them twice. You know, for as much as I love to diss on Alabama and their position in the playoffs, they still had good individual talent along their defensive line. We were beyond excited that Keon Keeley's coming back to Notre Dame. Well, he played against Indiana in the Rose Bowl. So they are battle tested, but this is going to be just a different level of a test because you're also going up against a very, very hot D-line. And so for Indiana, my biggest key for them, for the Hoosiers, is you got to hold strong in the trenches. Give Mendoza time to make plays. Open up creases in the run game for Kalen Black and Roman Hemby. Going to be absolutely huge for them. Absolutely huge.
Yep. Now, all that being said, that skill players got to step up and make plays, right? And you look at Miami's path and Indiana's path, it's been very similar. It's been one of Indiana's two backs going off. It's been Fernando Mendoza finding Elijah Sherratt or Charlie Becker or Omar Cooper stepping up and making big plays. And all three of them have had different moments in the playoffs where they've stepped up and done what they needed to do to make big plays in big moments. And what's interesting is, what I don't know that any of those guys are elite receivers in and of themselves, but they're so good as a unit that if you're a Notre Dame fan, just quickly looking at Notre Dame, this is sort of the model that I look at next year's Notre Dame receiving core. And I don't know if there's anyone as good as Jeremiah Smith. I don't think that there is. But Indiana doesn't have anybody as good as Jeremiah Smith either. I don't know that they have anybody as good as Malachi Toney of what he is now, much less what he'll be as a sophomore, junior, and senior. But as a unit, they're so good because if you want to stop Surratt, then Cooper and Becker go off. If you want to stop Cooper, then Surratt and Becker go off. If you want to stop Becker, then Surratt and Cooper go off. I mean, that's what makes them really hard to beat. And then on defense, obviously, their linebackers, Aiden Fisher's a dude, and Elijah Hardy's a dude, and obviously you got Pounds on the outside. You've got Amari Farrell at safety. Like they've got the athletes that can do damage. And then on the other side of the field, Malachi Toney's just been spectacular this season. And Mark Fletcher's really given him some big time moments. The Brown kid from North Dakota State's been a grinded out tough back for them this year that's had some clutch runs in the postseason. And your D line's got to play great, but then your DBs, you have to be more disciplined in coverage than you were against Ole Miss. Now, the good news for Miami is that was a bit of an anomaly against a very well-schemed team with a gunslinger at quarterback. Playing Ole Miss should help prepare them to play Indiana we had to chase those Ole Miss receivers around. We got a tune-up getting ready for Indiana. And that's something that I wonder how that's going to impact the game. And it could go one of two ways. Indiana hasn't had to exert as much energy the first two rounds. Are they fresher, more rested? Or are they not prepared to play in a tighter game? Then Miami, it's like, well, dude, they're battle-tested. I mean, they had to fight to beat A&M. They had to fight to beat Ohio State. They had to fight to beat Ole Miss. They're more battle-tested, which helps them. Or they've had to exert a lot more energy. This is their fourth game compared to three. Are they going to kind of hit that wall in this game? That's very interesting, aspect of it too, Trevor. And I don't know what that's going to be because it's different from a matchup to matchup. There's not like a universal rule that defines that. So I think that'll be an interesting aspect as well. But whose skill players step up and make the biggest plays? Whose quarterback can make the clutch plays? And look, you and I have banged on Carson Beck probably more than anybody has. And at times for good reason. But he's been exactly what Miami thought he was going to be in the postseason. He has been. He hasn't put up monster numbers. They haven't asked him to carry the team. They haven't asked him to say, boy, if Carson Beck doesn't throw for 350, we can't win this football game. They have not done that with Carson Beck. What they have done, however, is said, hey, man, we need you to make some big throws, or we need you to make some big runs. I mean, his legs are honestly two of the biggest plays he's made this postseason came with his legs. It was the scramble against Ohio State where he puts his shoulder down and run. Was it Sonny Styles or was it I forget who it was. Ran over an Ohio State defensive player, gets the first, and I don't mean run over like trucked him, but I mean just put his shoulder down and smashed into him because he knew he was getting close to the sticks. And then, of course, the game winner scramble against Ole Miss, where it's like, look, neither of these quarterbacks have lit the world on fire in the postseason. I mean, I don't think Fernando Mendoza's even gotten to 200 yards passing yet in a playoff game. Last time he passed for 200 yards was against Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. He's been less than 200 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. But he's made clutch throws when he's needed to early in games to put the game away. Carson Beck's averaging barely 200 yards a game, if that, in the postseason. Actually, yeah, I don't know if he's even there. So he threw for 103 against A&M, threw for 138 against Ohio State, and he threw for 268 against Ole Miss. So he's at 169.7 yards per game. He's got 4 touchdowns passing. He's got 1 touchdown rushing and only 1 turnover. And he's made those plays. That's going to be a very key aspect, is whose skill players can make those big plays and which quarterback can keep doing what they're doing. And I'm very curious which defense is going to be able to force the opponent quarterback to carry the team more. which is something that neither team has really asked their quarterback to do so far. It's different than last year where Will Howard was just dicing people up on the way to the championship game, and Riley Leonard had to put Notre Dame on his shoulders for a couple games. This has been a very different journey path to the championship for these two quarterbacks. Tonight, I think that changes. I think one of them is going to have to do more than what we've seen the first two rounds. Which one that is going to play a big role in who wins. Either way, this guy has to make more plays to win, but he can't. Or this guy's forced to make more big plays, and he does it. I think it's going to have a huge impact on who wins this game.
Absolutely. Last ones from me, man. Turnovers and winning the turnover battle has been key for both of these teams on their journey to the playoffs. I mean, we want Oregon really leaving the first half had no chance of winning that game when you put yourself down, -4, -3 in the turnover margin before you get to the final 30 minutes of game time. And then Miami's been able to feast on crucial turnovers that they've gotten against Ohio State, against Texas A&M on the road, against Ole Miss in crucial moments. So what happens? Who wins that turnover battle? And then the inverse is which quarterback and which team takes care of football the best. That's going to be the biggest key for one of the bigger keys for each of these teams. And then finally, this is top to bottom. This is head coach. This is offensive, defensive coordinators. And then these are players down to the starting quarterback to the gunners on special teams. Who handles the moment the best? This is by far the biggest moment that any of these players have played on from top to bottom. There's no transferring of yes, I understand Carson Beck played at Georgia. He wasn't playing in the national championship with Georgia in these meaningful moments. That's the closest one.
He didn't play in a single playoff game.
Nope.
Not a meaningful down.
Nope. Not a meaningful down. I think he got in
against TCU.
TCU.
Yeah. At the end of the game in a blowout. He went 2 of 3 in that game in a 65-7 win.
Yep.
That's actually the only he's played in the postseason and the playoffs prior to this year.
Excuse me. I take that back. The most experienced player in these big moments is the center for Indiana, Pat Coogan. What factor does that play? That's going to be very interesting.
Yeah. No, I like that the stage. This is still kind of new to both teams. This type of experience. So, yeah, I'm very curious to see. And then, with Indiana, again, sometimes being dominant on your way to the title game can be a benefit. You're fresher, you're tested, you're confident. The other team's worn out. Sometimes it can give you a false sense of we're the bad boys. And you kind of come in thinking you're just going to kind of walk all over that team, and you don't. And that team kind of punches you in the mouth a little bit, and you're not prepared for it. I like to, me, Trev, I like to use analogies and point to past things. And I remember the year that the Packers lost to the Broncos in the Super Bowl, and you go back and look at their postseason. They beat the Buccaneers pretty soundly. They beat the Niners pretty soundly. You look at how they kind of did down the stretch. Their last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They had won 7 straight games by double digits that year. From October 9th, 27th on, they lost 1 game to the Colts. Every other game they played was a double-digit win or more. Going into that Broncos game, where the Broncos that season in the postseason, they blew out Jacksonville in round 1, but they had a dogfight with Kansas City in round 2, a 14-10 win. And then Elway has to hit Shannon Sharp late in the game on the 3rd down to ice a 3-point win over Pittsburgh. Denver was more battle-tested. They won that game. And Green Bay was kind of got punched in the mouth a little bit. First drive, they go right down the field and score. But when Denver answers back, and Green Bay's like, hey, we're in this one now, man. We're in a battle here. And Denver was used to that. And they counterpunched and all these other, and then won the game. The other side, Green Bay hadn't really been in a game like that in a couple months. It benefited. Then there's other examples, Trevor, we can go show the team that, had blown people out, kind of cruised. The next year, the Broncos were the ones that cruised to the playoffs. They play the Falcons, who had been in some battles, and the Broncos smoked them.
Yep.
So you don't know what it's going to be, but I think that's going to be a key ingredient here for Indiana. Is how do you handle your success from the last 2 games?
Absolutely. Look at Ohio State last year. You could argue Texas didn't have more talent on their roster top to bottom than what Oregon did in the Rose Bowl. And Ohio State smacked them. Ohio State played in 2 games where it was over by halftime against Tennessee and against Oregon. And then they played Texas in their third game in the playoffs. And it was like, this game's a little bit closer. Now, I know the final score doesn't reflect it. I understand it was a 14-point game. But this, I mean, what, tie ball game going into the fourth quarter? They weren't able to get Jeremiah Smith going. Texas's defense was doing a good job. They were doing a good job shutting down the run, or at least keeping their powerful run game at bay. That's what does Indiana do in that instance? Because they've now played in 2 playoff games that were over by halftime. The Alabama game was over by halftime. The Oregon game was over by halftime. How do they respond in this one? To your point about sometimes you kind of hit the cruise control button, and Miami is a team that can come out and smack you in the mouth. We've watched them do it this entire postseason. I watched them do it on August 31st. So that's going to be really, really interesting to see how they handle it. Very, very interesting, Brian. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
Yep, me too. Me too. And then finally, Trev, whose coaches are going to be able to make the calls in the clutch moments?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, who gets their team most ready to play, most locked in, but then once the game kicks off, who's the one that's able to make the third down call to win the game? The head coaching decisions, all that stuff's going to play a factor as well.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Well, Brian, let's dive into predictions then, wrap up this segment. And I'll go ahead and get us started here. National championship again. Number 1, Indiana. Number 10, Miami. I have the Hoosiers winning this one and taking this one home 27-24. Sometimes when a team just catches fire, we can talk recruiting rankings. We can talk star ratings. Do you have a bigger star in college football than the Heisman Trophy winner? You know what I'm saying? So sometimes you just kind of have like a team of destiny year. And maybe that's Indiana this year, whether people love it or hate it, whether they disagree with it, whether they can't stand the fan base, yada, yada, yada. Indiana has proven that they are now the team to beat this year. Miami's been an extremely hot team. And that's why I have this final score 27-24. If Indiana thinks that Miami's just going to roll over and die like Oregon did, like Alabama did, that could be where I get this prediction wrong. I could see a world where Indiana jumps out to a 10-0 lead or a 14-0 lead, and they're like, just like Alabama, just like Oregon, this Miami team won't quit. And they will punch back, and they'll continue to punch back. But if this is going to be the game that I think that it is, it's going to be every yard is going to be personal. Every yard is going to be earned because of the style of play of both of these trenches. But the age, the experience, and the level of coachability on this team for the Hoosiers, I think, is going to win the day. Because Miami has great individual talent. To your point that you said earlier, Indiana doesn't have a Malachi Tony on it.
Mm-hmm.
But can the receiving corps play as a cohesive unit? I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
Will either of these coaches be patient enough to not go away from the run if it doesn't work in the first quarter?
Right.
Because I'm not going to judge how impactful a team's run game is in the fourth or in the first quarter. I'm going to look at the fourth quarter when you start to wear down. And what I love is you throw out the star rate, you throw away the recruiting rankings and the on 3 this and the 2-4-7 that. What team has more intestinal fortitude to say, hey, we're not going to be the ones to back down? And so far this season, that's been Indiana. I haven't seen them do that this year. They're undefeated. They haven't lost. So I'm going to be very interested to see how that ends up playing out. But, Brian, I have the Hoosiers winning this one. The Big Ten is bringing home its 3rd straight title in 3 years, and it's going to be Indiana's first in program history. So I have the Hoosiers winning.
I think both teams are capable of winning this game. Obviously, Trevor, that's why they're here. I do worry. Here's my concern for Miami. I worry about the early storm. You know, like Indiana's going to come out swinging. And like you said, they put teams away quickly. Can you weather that storm? And no pun intended with the hurricanes and all that kind of stuff. Like, can you weather that storm? Can you keep them out of it? Hey, if they move down the field, cool, it is what it is. Hold them to a field goal. Don't let them get in the end zone. Can you get to Carson Beck early? Can you get to Fernando Mendoza early? Like, that's the key. If Miami can kind of get to the second quarter, to their first possession of the second quarter, where this is a game where they have a slight lead or they're only down by a score, then I think they stay in this game. I think as long as they can just weather that early storm, because Miami, I don't think can come back against Indiana. I think Indiana could come back against Miami, but I don't think they can. Indiana just can put you away, man. Miami's got to kind of, take those punches, bob and weave, and then when you get your chance to counter, boy, you go on the attack. And I think they're able to do that. At the end of the day, however, I just think this Indiana team is too balanced and too good to win this game. I mean, this is an offense that if you hold them to 27, you've accomplished something. And in Miami, it's kind of like if you score 27, you've accomplished something offensively for most of the season. So I love the coaching of this game. Miami's D coordinator's done a great job. Bryant Haynes has done a great job. Shannon Dawson has really been able to kind of get the most out of Carson Beck in the postseason. It's been a fun year watching these guys coach. Mike Shanahan's done a great job. He's still the OC at Indiana, correct? Sunseri's the one that left. I always get those two guys confused. I keep thinking that it was Mike Shanahan that left, but he's really done a great job with this football team this year. Two really teams that are just playing better than everybody else right now. I mean, they just are. But I think Indiana is just too balanced. I think Indiana is legit on defense, much better than Miami on offense. And I think at the end of the day, they're able to do enough running the football that they are going to then open up some chances down the field. I just feel like it's harder for Miami to shut down all three of those receivers. I mean, Malachi Toney's the best receiver on the field tonight, but I'll take the next 2 to 3 that Indiana has over the next 2 to 3 that Miami has. That's kind of how I look at it. I think Miami can run the ball to a degree, but they're going to need to try to find some ways to gash Indiana early and keep that offense off the field early and let their defense adjust. But at the end of the day, I do think this game is going to be competitive, but I also like Indiana in this game. I have Indiana winning 27-20. I believe I had originally sent to somebody, let me find this real quick. I think that I had told when we did our predictions for Believe, I believe I had, I had Indiana winning 24-20. I'm kind of there. I go 27-20 now, upped it a little bit. But I do think it's a competitive game. I just don't know that Miami has enough firepower to make enough scores. I mean, they needed every second to get to 30 against Ole Miss, whose defense is just not good. And Indiana likely won't be turning guys loose the way that Ole Miss did down the field. But if you're Miami and you can hit a couple of those big shots early, that's how you can kind of maybe soften Indiana up. I won't be surprised if Shannon Dawson has a couple, bootleg, leak the tight end out the back door, big play, try to, wheel route, some kind of things to try to hit a big play early and in hopes of backing Indiana off and then being able to establish the ground and pound. I do think that Shannon Dawson's going to look for some of those, whether it's a screen, a reverse, on top of those things, something to create a big play to slow Indiana down. That's going to be their key. I just think Indiana's too balanced and has a little bit too much firepower, and that's why at the end of the day, I'm going with the Hoosiers winning 27-20.
Love it. Well, I got the Hoosiers 27-24. Brian has the Hoosiers winning 27-20. This is the last game of the 2025-2026 college football season, and then we will officially be turning the page to the 2026 season. It'll be here before you know it. But folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting everything wrapped up today with a mailbag. So get those questions in. But before we get there, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. But now that it's going to be the bulk of the offseason, the best way to stay in tune and the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, folks, in part 3 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel, we got a daily mailbag to take us home. And of course, as always, if you want your question answered, put MB for mailbag or put a little mailbox emoji, both before your question. It lets us know to set it aside. And as always, super chats do get bumped up to the top, and I believe we have a couple of those in there today, Brian.
We do. I do want to bring up a non-super chat first, simply because it's relevant to what we just got done talking about.
Right on.
And so I wanted to bring this from sine, cosine, tangent. I wanted to bring this question up here real quick.
Love it. Little math name to get us started. Saw a show where the take was, quote, Indiana winning could be bad for the sport for the sole reason it would put unrealistic pressure and expectations on every other team, end quote. I'm curious to your thoughts.
I think it's a terrible take. I mean, what programs are going to be getting pressure put on their coaches that doesn't already exist? mean, Penn State went to the semifinals last year and fired their coach the very next year after starting 3-3. Like, isn't that pressure already there? And as a head coach, don't you kind of want that pressure? And at the end of the day, if you're spending money to go buy a roster, then you're going to want results. I don't care what Indiana does. It doesn't matter what Indiana does. I think this is nothing other than blue blood snobbery from the media. It's the same exact reason why Indiana wasn't a preseason top 10 team, which I believe for both you and I, they were when we did our preseason top 25. Now, we still had them too low, but we both were like, guys, you know how much how much is coming back? It's a good football team. We also both loved the Fernando Mendoza pickup this offseason. I think it's just snobbery. Oh, this is a bad what precedent does it set? Isn't this kind of why we like the way that it is in college football where NIL this is one of the things I looked forward to in NIL is that a team like Indiana can go get a player that in the past they couldn't have gone and got. Now, I've said before, I don't love the portal rules, but the portal rules, if they ever get fixed, will get fixed in a way where most of the guys that Indiana got, they would have got anyway. All the JMU kids could have come with them. Fernando Mendoza, first-time transfer. Like I believe he was also a grad transfer, if I remember correctly. Wasn't he at Cal for 4 years? I could be wrong on that. But the point is that I don't have any kind of problem with that. And matter of fact, I think if anything, Indiana winning is good for the sport in that programs who never believed that we were capable of being that kind of program can now go and build themselves into being that type of program. No, he's actually a true senior, so he was not a fifth-year guy. But you get what I'm saying, Trev? Like, this says, hey, Kentucky, you just made a great hire on the offensive side, as your head coach. You've got a shot if you do things right, get this, do that, to maybe rise to the top. It's no different than what Vanderbilt did. Like these things are good for the sport of football, of college football, in my opinion. That's not the problem. This blue blood snobbery of, well, Indiana's not this and Alabama's that. Well, screw that. Indiana's been a significantly better football team than Georgia and Alabama the last 2 years. Significantly so. I just saw a tweet from a guy who otherwise has really bad tweets, but he said, how does Georgia kind of like go over in the playoffs the last couple of years, do nothing in the portal, and then they're ranked as a top 3 team for next year, which everybody's ranking them as a top 3 team next year. It's like, okay, whatever. Same thing. I think this is good for the sport. Hey, if you want to win in college football today, there's nothing keeping you from doing that. You may have to work harder for it, but there's nothing keeping you. I think the only bad precedent it sends is that weak non-conference schedules can get you here. That's the precedent that I think is bad that Indiana could set. That's what I'm concerned about. But, that only lasts a certain period of time till the next year when some team that does that doesn't advance. But I'm for it. Look, if you're making over millions of dollars, which almost every head coach at the Power 4 level is making, and you view this as somehow a bad thing because now there's more pressure on you, find something else to do with your life. Because that's how this should be. What else are we doing this for other than to try to go out there and become the best program we can be? And Indiana has laid out the pathway for how to make that happen in the current rules. So you're not going to see me with that big boy snobbery that I think is happening with a lot of people that IU doesn't belong here. They're the upstart. That's exactly what Marcus Freeman was for Notre Dame. This guy's 30-something years old. He's never been a head coach before. He doesn't belong on this end. Sean Davis talked about this. Marcus Freeman just kind of kicked down that door to the big boy table and said, I'm sitting here. Well, you got to pay your dues first. No, I don't. I'm here. And I got no problem with it. They've earned it.
I definitely don't think it's bad for the sport. Let me start off by saying that. But the unrealistic expectations, like Indiana didn't set that precedent. People are just wanting more immediate results. Like the day and age of like, okay, like get in, get your feet under you. First year, you're getting the lay of the land. Second year, you're getting recruiting classes on top of you. And then now in the third year, it's okay, like what are you going to do? And we're seeing it at multiple levels within the sport of football. Look at the NFL this year. The Bills just fired Sean McDermott. I mean, why did they do that? It's because in year one with the Bears, Ben Johnson took him to the divisional. It's in year one with the Patriots, Mike Vrabel is now taking them to the AFC Championship game.
And the Titans are looking for another coach again.
Exactly. Like, well, it's already started to happen in college. Indiana's just kind of the I guess you'd call it like the flagship of that conversation, but they're not the sole reason why these expectations are being put on
And this has
college
gone on
teams.
forever. Remember when the Iowa State fired Dan McCartney because he wasn't winning enough, because he had raised the bar so high that he couldn't get him to that next level, and he got fired for some dumb reason? Dan Mullen a few years ago goes to back-to-back New Year's Six games, wins 10-plus games his first 2 years. In year three, during the COVID year, they play Alabama in the SEC title game, lose by 6, and the next year they get off to a slow start and they fire him. The expectations are already there for all the blue bloods. Like, Indiana doing this isn't all of a sudden mean that Iowa's going to be like, well, Kirk Ferentz, if you don't win a title next year, we're going to fire you. Like, that's not going to change their standard. What this does, however, is let programs like Iowa know and Iowa State know, like, if you want to win at this level, here's what you do. This is the blueprint. It's not going to work for everybody. You know, it's like everybody's always trying to find the next insert player or insert coach. Well, the reason Kurt Cignetti is Kurt Cignetti is because there aren't a lot of other Kurt Cignettis. That's the world of it. But them winning or like them getting in the title game alone raises the expectation for those teams. I mean, they beat Ohio State, Oregon, and Alabama on the way to this title game. Miami beating them by a touchdown tonight doesn't all of a sudden, well, guess we don't have to worry about living up to that standard now. Yeah, you kind of do. And so I don't think it changes that. And if you're a coach who doesn't want that pressure on you, find something else to do.
Yep. Indiana's run just helped eliminate the excuses. If somebody that is perennially the worst program in college football is now playing for a national championship 2 years into Cignetti's tenure, what's your excuse? That's what it does. It doesn't it's not bad for the sport. I'm with you. Super chat from Benny J. Appreciate you. I apologize if this has been asked already. Is there an injury update for some players like Jagasaw or Kedron Young?
No, I'm sorry you wasted a super chat on that, but no, there isn't. Notre Dame didn't release anything in Freeman's most recent press conference. There was never any intention of them giving us any information on injuries until they got closer to spring ball, which I'm fine with because it doesn't really matter until we get to spring ball anyway. But I mean, there's obviously rumors floating around, but I don't have anything concrete on either player. Yep.
From Mark E. Stewart, appreciate the super chat, Mark. I think Notre Dame will be much more active in pass game next year, displaying a more explosive offense while putting Carr on full display. I also think Notre Dame will push harder for Heisman than with Love. Agree?
No, I don't think Notre Dame will push harder for CJ Carr as a Heisman Trophy contender than they did for Jeremiah Love. I don't. I just think that's kind of who they are. Now, I hope that I'm wrong because they need to start doing that more. We talked about that a week. Did we do that show last week where we talked about how that's good for the program?
Yes, sir.
I mean, for example, Notre Dame today is doing an in-home visit with Julius Jones Jr. Big time 5-star receiver. They just visited Quentin Burrell late last week. They went and saw him in a school. You don't think having the Heisman Trophy favorite at quarterback doesn't help their pitch when they're on the road in January recruiting stud 5-star receivers? Of course it does. And so I wish Notre Dame would do that more, honestly, Mark. I think they should do that more. And they've been very bad about that. And it's not just the Heisman. They weren't great at pushing any of their award candidates the last few years. It frustrates me, but they need to do more. And yeah, they were very late with Jeremiah Love. But honestly, in September, Jeremiah Love wasn't playing like a Heisman Trophy player. Outside of the A&M game, his first 4 games were just kind of You know, he had great one against Arkansas, great one against A&M, but then Miami, he didn't do a whole lot. And then, against Purdue, he was good. But, I mean, Jadarian Price was their better runner the first month of the season. Jeremiah was the better playmaker. So, I don't get into that. And also, honestly, they don't need to because the national media is going to do their own hype about CJ Carr. I mean, dude, the storylines that the national media is going to have about CJ and Arch Manning and Julian Sand once we get through this season is going to sell it enough. And at the end of the day, if CJ leads Notre Dame next year to a 12-0 record, it's going to speak for itself to a degree. But I do think they'll be more active in the pass game next year and more explosive offense. And I do think Carr is going to be a big part of that. And I think that more than any media pitch is what's going to fuel him to that award or not, but it also is going to fuel their success because that's where the team is better built, in my opinion, for next season, is to be a team that is more involved in the pass game, that is more explosive in the pass game. That's where a lot of your strengths are. I mean, your best player next year is going to be your quarterback. And there's a reason they went out and invested what they invested time and money-wise to go ahead and keep Jaden Greathouse, keep Cam Williams, keep Micah Gilbert, then go get Quincy Porter and go get Mylan Graham, and then bring in the big-time receivers they brought in the high school ranks as well with Caden Finley and Bubba Frazier and guys like that. So, absolutely. I mean, that's why you went out and got Ian Premer. You didn't bring in Ian Premer to attach him to the end of the line of scrimmage and say, all right, buddy, we're going to have you just go block all day. And you brought that young man in to make plays. You didn't bring in Preston Frizel to say, hey, man, we're going to turn you into the next Tommy Trumbull, and you're just going to be a great blocker and catch the occasional pass. No, you brought that kid in because he's a flat-out baller in the pass game. That's where Mike Denbrock wants to go. Doesn't mean he doesn't want to run the football. Go look at the online class they brought in. Go look at the running back class they just brought in. But they understand in order to be the kind of team that we want to be at Notre Dame, which is a championship contender every year, we got to be able to do both at a high level.
Oh, absolutely. No, I mean, Mike Denbrock's goal is to be balanced, but it's different for every team. What does Notre Dame have to do to get balanced? Elevate the pass game. Odds are Notre Dame isn't going to have 29 rushing touchdowns wrapped up between two running backs next year. Do I think that the running back room could account for, 30 touchdowns? Yeah, I do. I don't think it's going to be split between two guys. CJ Carr is going to play a huge, huge factor in that. Like there's other teams, like I've said this before. Ohio State is best when they're balanced. But what do they need to work on? A consistent run game, because the pass game is already there. For Notre Dame, it's the exact opposite. It's the journey to being balanced, but their pass game has to catch up to where their run game has been.
And it took a big step this year. It did. It took a real big step this year, Mark. And I think it'll take another one next year.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it.
Super chat from Eric Carroll. Appreciate you. The offensive line seemed to improve during the season, albeit against inferior defenses. Was there anything in their play later in the season that indicated they may have performed better against an elite D-line than they did in week 0?
Well, there's no doubt they would have performed better against Miami in week 12 than they did in week 0, or week 1. The question is not would they have been better. The question is would they have been good enough?
Yeah.
And I think that was the fair question. They were awful in game 1. Technically awful, assignment awful, effort awful. It was terrible. They were better in game 2 than they were in game 1. Now, they still weren't good, but they were better. They certainly got better as the year went on. Would they have performed better in the postseason? Like if they had a rematch against Miami, would they have gotten beat as bad as they did in the opener? No. Would they have played well enough to win that game? I don't know. I can't promise you that. Because to your point, Eric, I think your point is great, is that they didn't play a lot of great D-lines after the second game of the year. Matter of fact, I'd argue they didn't really play any good, really good D-lines after. There's a good player here and there. NC State Brandon Cleveland had a big game. And, you could argue Boise State might have been the best D-line they played other than maybe USC. I mean, USC had the Devin Tompkins kid was considered one of the top portal D tackles in the class, and Notre Dame ran all over them. I mean, so there were some good individual players, but there weren't any necessarily great units like what they played in the first 2 games. And they handled their business. But you can also look at the film and say, okay, Anthony Knapp's pass sets were more sound schematically in games 8 through 12 than they were in games 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can see those improvements. Hey, they were driving their feet through contact in the run game more effectively in game 6 than they were in game 1. They were picking up twists better in game 7 than they did in game 1. Now, you could say it's easier to pick up a twist from the team that we saw in game 7. Very true. But in game 1, they weren't even seeing them. You know what I mean? So and in last year, they weren't even seeing them. So you can tell the difference between they're just better than the people they're playing and they're actually improving in certain areas. Yeah. What I don't know is how would they have played if they were playing a team with that was bigger, stronger, and faster, like the Miami unit, like the A&M unit. So I'm kind of in between. That actually, Trev, you and I talked about that before the playoff rankings, is that was my biggest concern about Notre Dame making a run. was
Yeah.
could the offensive line play well enough in 4 games for them to win a championship? That was my only concern.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Eric, we're talking about a team that on FanDuel, the day that the rankings came out, I mean, literally minutes before, were tied for the third best odds to win the championship. You don't have those odds if your offensive line is still playing like it did in week 1 against Miami. That being said, the level of inconsistency leaves me at a point like that we saw post Miami. Their level of inconsistency made me and Brian both question what their abilities would be in the postseason if they had to go against an Ohio State defensive line, if they had to go against an Indiana defensive line, if they had to go against Miami or Texas A&M's defensive lines again. So we just don't know. They didn't do what a dominant offensive line should do against inferior and sometimes significantly inferior. Sometimes they did.
Occasional, but it wasn't consistent.
Exactly.
USC was great. BC was
Yep. I mean, USC was great. The week before, NC State was
Yep.
So it's just they never stacked performances. I mean, what? The best performances they had back-to-back were arguably Syracuse and Stanford.
And they just out-talented those 2 teams.
Exactly.
I mean, it was
Exactly.
I will say the last 3 games were pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the O-line really battled their tails off against Pitt, and that's why I believe they would have been better in the postseason, that game right there. But Pitt is still not Indiana. Pitt is still not Ohio State. Notre Dame just got Pitt's best guy out of the portal. Jimmy Scott was a solid player. He's not Cassius Howe. He's not Reuben Bain. He's not Akeem Missador. He's not those guys. So that's what I say. They'd have been better, but would it have been good enough? Much different question.
Yeah.
Much different question. And that's why we say that next year they're going to have to be better, Eric. They're absolutely going to have to be better.
That's just what's so frustrating. If the offensive line played against Miami like how they played against Texas A&M, they would have won. And if the defense would have played against Texas A&M like how they played against Miami, they probably would have won. That's so frustrating. Anyways, sorry, had to get that out. From Joseph Parr, in your opinion, who will be the better quarterback between Noah Grubbs and Brady Hart?
It's a good question. They're very different players. I think Brady has more physical tools than Noah does. I think Noah has a little bit more of the intangibles than what Brady flashed in high school. Noah showed a lot of doubters in the playoffs that he's a better quarterback than you realize. I also think Noah's arm's going to get a lot stronger when he starts putting some weight back on. I think he got too skinny. I've said this before. I think he got too skinny. And after he was a bigger kid, he needed to lose weight. I think he got too skinny and lost power. He had a stronger arm as a sophomore than he did as a senior. You get him in a Notre Dame strength program, I think that arm, that power is going to come back a little bit. But a lot of people like to bang on Noah. He's this, that. He put a solid team on his shoulders and led him to a state championship in Florida and won the Gatorade Player of the Year, won Mr. Football in the state of Florida, I should say. And that means a whole lot more to me than the kid can throw the ball 70 yards. And I think people are missing that Noah's got some of those intangibles. He's got better. His pocket presence got better. His accuracy got better. His timing got better. He's got tools. Brady's got more. Brady's got a stronger arm. He's more athletic. There's no doubt about that. But Brady didn't necessarily elevate a team that had like Javon Boggs and some legitimate Division I players on it. And so that's why I've really actually, my opinion of Noah has grown watching him at the end of that season for Lake Mary, that he literally took a team and put them on his shoulders and won a state championship. And I think he's better than people think. So it just depends on whether or not Brady Hart can develop the intangibles piece. If he does, he'll probably he has a higher ceiling than Noah. But I think Noah has the higher floor. That's how and that was kind of what it came down to for Notre Dame when they decided between the two. And I think it ended up working out well because, Brady Hart obviously reclassified and his clock would have started a little bit sooner than I would have preferred. But Noah Grubbs is a very underrated player when you think about how he's viewed amongst Notre Dame fans.
Yeah. From Notre Dame Villain, is this the most determined Marcus Freeman we will see this year because of everything that happened to him and to Notre Dame?
Oh, I think so, but there's no actually. I don't even think so. I know so. He will be determined, but determination has never been a problem for Marcus Freeman. It's will the plan be effective? I mean, he was determined last season. I mean, we heard about how angry he was at the title game, and they wanted to get back. And determination is not why Notre Dame underachieved this year from the head coach. It's about was the plan that they put into effect beginning in January good? I mean, you got to think about Trev. They're getting about a 3-week head start on the offseason program, about a month because they got done playing last year, January 20 something. They gave the guys like a week or so off, a couple weeks off, finish, do this. And then they came back. They didn't really start ramping things up till early mid February. This year, I mean, they ramped things up January 12th, and they're hitting after being off for a month. So I think that'll help a little bit too. This team was going to be a little fresher the off season, where they were holding a lot of guys out of spring ball because were like a month and a half away, out of playing in the championship game. We didn't see Emil Wagner play a bunch in the spring. I think that hurt his development. I do. And that's why I think he kind of regressed a little bit this season. But I think that determination will be the key, but that's not what's going to determine how good this team is going to be. It's going to be what's the plan, what's the buy-in, what's the leadership, can you stay healthy, can you improve certain aspects of. They're determined like crazy, but if you're determined to win but you don't execute, you don't have a good plan and you don't execute that plan, then look, when I coached against Mount Union in the third round of the playoffs, we had already gone down to Texas and beaten Hardin Simmons. We had just beat the number 2 seed 41-0. Our determination to beat Mount Union was as high as it could be. They kicked our butts because they were a better football team than we were. And it didn't matter what we did. We weren't going to beat them that day. So determination only takes you so far. They've got the talent to win, but will the plan be sound? Will the leadership be where it needs to be? And will they execute that plan? That's going to be a lot more than determination. I have no doubt this team will be determined. And honestly, Trevor, you and I talked before the portal season opened. They're like, the portal season is going to tell us a lot about this Notre Dame football team and its buy-in. How many of the name players jump in for paydays? And honestly, the only name player that jumped in the portal on his own decision was a kid who felt wronged during the season. It wasn't for money. Everybody else stayed in. And of like the big name guys. That's not true at a lot of other places. And I think that shows a level of buy-in. Notre Dame's not the only team that's the case, but that to me shows that there is legit buy-in, determination, but that only takes you so far.
Right now, there's a lot of boxes that are being checked. They responded well in the transfer portal. They brought in elite, high-level talent. They filled needs. They brought in the number 1 recruiting class in the 2026 recruiting cycle. The players stayed that they needed to stay. So the buy-in is there. One thing that I know for sure is there's going to be no shortage of bulletin board material for this team, because one thing that we talked about last offseason was like, okay, what strings are you going to pull? You still can't talk about keeping the pain from Northern Illinois because a lot of these kids just got done playing for the national championship. Can you pull the strings of making it there but not getting over the hump? Maybe. There's going to be no shortage of motivating factors for Marcus Freeman this year. But to Brian's point, he's motivated every year. This year, maybe more so. I don't know the question to that. And we're not going to know the answer to that until we start to see him in spring, till we see what they do over the summer workouts, who stays, who goes home, what they do in fall camp, and then ultimately what they do in Lambeau Field against Wisconsin. So it's just going to be a constant evaluator, but I would expect that this team's going to be ready. They should be, at least, because if the playoff snub isn't going to do it, then I don't know what. Super chat from Lou Holtz, Thunder and Bolts. Appreciate you. Been a while, gents. Maybe hyperbolic, but is this a make or break year for the offensive line and Joe Rudolph? Tired of good. Let's get back to elite.
Yeah, absolutely. It is for me. I don't know if it is for Marcus Freeman, but it certainly is for me. I mean, if you can't do it now, I mean, it's a microcosm of the entire team. If you can't do it now from a motivation standpoint, then, and when I mean do it now, I don't even mean winning a championship. Maybe there's just a better team than you next year. And you play your best and you get to the semifinals, you get to the title game, and you just get beat by a better team. Okay. Go make your team better. I mean, the buy-in was there. Like, I'm proud of that team. Like I said, I've been proud of my football team in games we lost. I was proud of how we played when we lost to Mount Union. They were better than us. I was proud of the team that I coached when we lost to Tom Arth and James Madison in the playoffs. John Carroll in the playoffs. we played we played hard. We didn't execute great, but our kids left everything out on the field. You can be proud of a team after a loss. You can then say, hey, we got to clean some stuff up and execute here, and we got to get better there, and we got to recruit better here. But you can still say we left it all out there and played our butts off. We just got beat by a better team. But it's got to be that, right? It's either championship or somebody was just better than you, but you still maximized who you can be as a football team. Yeah, I'm 100% agree with that. Now, does Marcus Freeman view it the same way that I do? There's no evidence that he does, but there's no evidence that he doesn't necessarily either. But I think that it's absolutely is a make or break here.
Yeah, the conversation with the offensive line and the position coach is just, what more do you need? At some point, you get to the spot where it's like, okay, you have enough time in this program. Every single player that's going to be in this room that you've recruited, you've developed. If you can't get a Joe Moore Award finalist out of an offensive line room that consists of one of these five, of Anthony Knapp and Will Black and Charles Jagasaw and Ashton Craig and Gerby Lambert and Grayson McHugh and Christopher Tarrick and all of these guys, the list goes on and on and on. The offensive line didn't lose a single player that we know of right now to the transfer portal. If you can't get it out of them, Quentin Nelson's not walking through the door again with years of eligibility remaining. If you can't do it with this group, then that's your peak. So that's where you're at. And if your peak is good, not great, then you have to be willing to evaluate the coaching staff the same way that you do with the players on your roster.
Yep.
Super chat from JS31186. Appreciate the super chat. What can the staff do better to have the boys ready in September? Under Marcus Freeman, it seems like they treat September like preseason.
Well, yeah. It to a degree, it kind of is. Fall camp is anyway. I mean, you're not going to scrimmage every other day. I don't agree with the premise. I mean, let's not forget that in last year's preseason opener, they went on the road and beat Texas A&M by 10. The year before that, they were undefeated the first 4 games of September. So, I mean, I think we're overreacting a little bit. They lost to 2 top 10 teams, one of which is in the national championship game by a combined 4 points. So, I think we're overreacting a little bit. A big thing is just, again, get your lines more ready to play in game 1. Make sure your coordinator has an idea of what he's doing. The difference this year than was not true last year is you have a coordinator going into year 2 on defense as opposed to his first game last year. You've got a quarterback going into his second year as a starter as opposed to his first start last year. That's part of it. But neither of those things are why Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner played terrible in the opener against Miami.
Right.
So it's about getting your line play to play at a higher level. I mean, we saw Anthony Knapp not play a lot in the spring because of the knee injury. We saw Emil get rested, and guess what? Those guys came out in the opener. I think the issues with last year's team started because Notre Dame was going through something that was new, which is how do we handle a shortened offseason because we were playing a month later than we normally play. I don't think they handled it great. So you got to adjust that. But I don't have if it was as simple as me just saying, hey, here's the answers, then I promise you Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrock and Al Washington and Mike Mickens and Mike Brown and Gino Gaduli and all those Chris Ash, all those guys would be able to find those answers.
Yeah.
Like if Brian Driscoll and Trevor Trowbridge could put their finger on every single issue to address and fix it, and we were right, and Notre Dame's coaches couldn't address it, then, we need to switch jobs. It's been different every year.
Yeah.
And I think a big part of it is just sometimes it's circumstance. And but then you say, well, Miami had a first-time quarterback and a brand new D coordinator as well. That's why I say it's about getting your lines more ready to play. What do you need to do to make sure that your lines can play better football in the opener? Because where did Notre Dame beat Texas A&M more than anything else in 2024? They beat him in the trenches. Flat out. That's the key.
Absolutely.
So fix that and you start better. But I also think the schedule's more conducive to a faster start as well.
I mean, the schedule's more conducive. You have more experience on your roster. The lines need to elevate their play. And this is the first time in Freeman's tenure that they have a returning starting quarterback. So that's going to be huge. That's going to be huge as well. From Jimmy James, are you more confident in the roster or the coaching staff for 2026?
Depends on the position. I'm more confident in the talent of the roster than I am necessarily the coaching staff, because I have a question mark still at offensive line. Is the coaching elite? I have question marks about the wide receivers coach. I think he's better than what a lot of Notre Dame fans think that he is. I think he's been a good receivers coach. I think he's capable of being an elite receivers coach. He's just got to show it. Then, I think Al Washington did a great job last year, and now he's coaching linebackers. How's that going to be? How's Charlie Parcher's going to be? How's he going to adapt? I think those things are going to go pretty well. I got question marks about whether or not Marty Biaggi can develop a kicker that doesn't get hurt or loses confidence. Like, first time that happens, the next time that happens will be the first time that happens since he took over. So those are big question marks that I have, and they're going to determine whether or not you get the most out of the talent. And we talked about Chris Ash earlier, so I'm more confident in the talent of this roster than I am the coaching. And if the coaching is good everywhere, then this team is going to be pretty darn good. If it's but O-line and D coordinator are the two biggest ones, and special teams coordinator the three ones for me.
I also have more confidence in the roster than the coaching staff. Having said that, I will also add, because of the state of the roster, I do think that gives, and not that I'm saying that it would be okay if this happens, but because of the state of the roster, the margin for error for the coaching staff is also not as small as what it was in previous years. Meaning, you have more players at your disposal, like wide receiver room, for example. We have ideas and we have preferences of what that wide receiver rotation should be, right? We think about Quincy Porter to the boundary, Jaden Greathouse to the slot, rotating with like a Mylan Graham or a Logan Saldate, and then Jordan Faison to the field, rotating with one of, Cam Williams or Mylan Graham. But because of the level of talent in the room, I don't think anybody would also be upset if the starting boundary was Micah Gilbert rotating with Quincy Porter. And you get Jordan Faison to the slot, and then Jaden Greathouse and Mylan Graham rotate to the field. So the margin for error, because of the state of the roster, has widened on the coaching staff. Having said that, though, I do still have more confidence in the roster. So, from Archie Ingram, Brian Smith on his portal show that he talked to you about the Duke quarterback situation. Do you think he leaves?
Yeah, Brian and I were chatting about that earlier today. I think he's going to try to leave. I think he's going to probably end up getting to Miami. I think Duke's going to make it a little bit difficult. I am very curious to see what Jim Phillips does here. And the reality is, the longer this goes, the more chance there is that somebody else comes in with an even better package, which would actually be kind of interesting. But no, I think eventually he'll be playing somewhere else next year. It's kind of a gross situation. First you had the Damon Williams thing. Now you've got this coming. It's going to get ugly. It's going to get very ugly. And they got to regulate agents. This is disgusting. I mean, what kind of a-hole agent is going to go out there and say, hey, look, man, I know you've signed this deal and we have this contract, but we're going to do this. What exactly are you like? You're a scumbag. I'm sorry. And you know what? He didn't force Darian Mensah to take it either. These young men deserve some responsibility and some accountability as well. If you didn't want to stay at Duke, then you should have waited longer before you signed a contract with Duke. You know what I mean? So, that. But if you're Duke, guys, I go back and I say it again. It's like the guy that Hook goes to a party, meets a girl. She's got a boyfriend. She hooks up with you at a party. Y'all get together. She dumps that guy, comes to you. And then a month later, you're shocked that she went to a party without you, met a dude and hooked up with the dude and left you. It's like, Duke, this is how you got him. And now the Duke situation was clean. It was by the rules. It was the kid jumped in the portal. They signed him. And but there was some tampering involved there. He went to Duke pretty quickly when he jumped in. But like, this is what he did. This is what he did to Tulane to come play for you. And now you're shocked that he's doing it to you to go play at Miami. What did you expect? So the whole thing is just gross. They've got to rein in the agents and they've got to fix the portal. Because if the portal was done the right way, well, let me rephrase. If the portal was done in the right realistic way, then he could have transferred to Duke, but he couldn't then leave for Miami. So, yeah, I do think ultimately, though, he'll end up leaving. I think this is different than the Damon Williams thing. I don't know that the Damon Williams is necessarily gung-ho about leaving. I think he was kind of talked into leaving. I think Darian Mensah is a little bit of a different story.
From Raymond Harton, do you think technique issues along the O-line can cause some of these injuries? Thanks.
They can, but like they're not why Billy Schrouth got injured this year. They can at times because the worst thing you can do as an offensive lineman that have happened to you is when your foot is planted in the ground and someone lands on your knee or on your leg. When you're moving your feet, there's more give, and sometimes you can get your knee sprained, but it's not planted in the ground, and there goes your ligaments. So I think sometimes when you see this, as a guy's not moving his feet, somebody falls into a planted foot, and then there's nowhere to go. It only has so much give, and then boom, there goes your ligaments. So I think that's kind of part of it, as well. So I think that can be a reason why guys don't move their feet as much. I think can be a reason for some of the knee injuries, but that's about it. I mean, some of this is just bad luck.
Yeah, agreed. From D. Smith 16, what are your thoughts on the news coming out with Carson Beck not attending classes for 2 years and yet being able to play?
That's false. Like, I know people are saying that. That's flat out 100% false. He didn't say, I haven't been to classes for 2 years. His comment was clunky, but they were asking about going to class. He's like, I graduated 2 years ago. He didn't say I haven't been going to class for 2 years because he legally can. I mean, he's been at classes. Now, he's probably taking online classes. He's probably not sitting in on a master's class. It's probably not the same kind of workload, but he's taking classes. I mean, let's not forget Matt Leinart was taking piano and ballroom dancing his last year at USC. Why? Because he'd already graduated. And so he's just taking the classes he needs to be able to play his final year at USC. At no point in time did Carson Beck said he has not attended classes for 2 years. That's not what he said. That's what people said he said. But if you go back and listen to the quote, that's not what he said. And this is a much ado about nothing. It was said in a kind of a dumb way, but what moron reporter asks him about classes? Dude's a freaking 6th-year senior. Why would he be taking classes in the spring? Do you not know how this works? Are you that stupid? Are you that bad at your job? Well, you and I found out that there actually are a lot of people that bad at their job in this business. Why would a 6th-year senior who graduated 2 years ago, who after this game is going to be going to get ready for the NFL, be taking spring classes? How stupid of a question was that? Did he answer it well? No. And look, I am no Miami defender, but in no way, shape, form, or fashion has he been not taking classes for 2 years. And that's not what he said. It's what you're responding to what somebody said he said. Because he didn't say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I also share a lot of my thoughts too about like classes with portal guys. Like sometimes you're at the mercy of what the school accepts. Like, I mean, look, I'll be real about it. I mean, Riley Leonard went to Notre Dame and then became a theater major because some of his credits didn't transfer over. And I hate to break it to people, but he's not going to go on Broadway once he's done playing football. So sometimes it's just you're at the mercy of whatever. So I don't get involved into those conversations too much. Super chat from Tyler Evans. Appreciate you, man. Is it true that Jim Phillips let Miami keep all the revenue from the playoffs instead of dispersing it to the ACC?
Well, yes and no. Jim Phillips didn't just all unilaterally decide that. It was part of the negotiations to end the lawsuit with Florida State and Clemson. Is that success was going to create greater revenue for the teams that have success, and part of it was if you go to the playoffs, you get that money. So, yes, that was part of what Jim Phillips gave up to get Florida State and Clemson to back out of their lawsuits. He also shortened the grant of rights when they can get out. But, yes, it's an exhibit like 97,005 why Jim Phillips is a terrible commissioner. But, yes, He did, but it wasn't a unilateral decision where he just up and decided for no reason whatsoever to let Miami keep the money. This is part of what came out of the agreement from the lawsuits that Miami and Clemson had.
From Lucas Gaddis, am I too soon to proclaim a statue build for Marcus Freeman?
Way too soon. You got to win a championship first.
Yeah. Another one from Lucas. I'm really not even worried about not having Love. Yes, he was so elite on every side of the ball, but so was the guy currently in starting position, Aeneas Williams.
I don't agree with that. I don't like having to kind of sound like I'm banging on Aeneas. I'm not. Aeneas Williams is a very good football player. There's nothing he's elite at. There's a lot of things he's very good at. There's nothing he's elite at so far. Now, maybe that changes, but even as a true freshman, you could see Jeremiah Love was elite at certain things. So I think Aeneas is very good. I don't think he's elite at anything. But part of what makes him such a good player is that he's kind of good at everything. He can run the ball with power. He can make people miss. He can pass block. He can run block. He can catch the ball short. He can catch the ball in the screen game and make people miss. He can catch the ball down the field. He's good at everything. I don't know that he's elite at anything. And Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price were. So am I worried about losing Jeremiah Love? No, because I think the team is going to be okay. But I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you or myself or anybody else that Aeneas Williams is in the same league as Jeremiah Love, because he's not. His production might be similar next year, but that's going to be a byproduct of what's around him is better.
Agreed 100%. Jeremiah Love was the best running back of my lifetime. And this is not a slight to Aeneas, but I would be beyond shocked if at the end of the 2026 season, I was like, and Aeneas Williams is the second best running back of my lifetime. Like, it's just, there's levels to different things here, Lucas. And I'm very confident in Aeneas's ability to be the number one running back, but I'm not ready yet to be like, it's like we're not even going to miss Jeremiah Love. Like, I'm not there yet.
Yeah, agree.
From Irish for Life 99, how many All-Americans could you see on this team?
I mean, I could see CJ. I could see one pass catcher. I could see up to two offensive linemen. I could see 1 to 2 defensive linemen potentially. I could see a linebacker. I could see a couple DBs. I mean, there's a chance for several All-Americans. I mean, there's a chance for an All-American at every position on the roster except maybe tight end and running back. Just because those might be more by committee than anything else. And I'd say receiver, probably same type of thing. But O-line, quarterback, D-line, linebacker, secondary, lots of All-American candidates. How many? We'll have those conversations, Paul, when we get closer to fall camp.
Another one from Irish for Life. Was Mendoza trying to throw the ball away at Penn State and Cooper just climbed the ladder and made a miracle catch?
No, he was trying to throw the ball high where only his player would have a chance. You actually go back and look at the tight. He sees Omar Cooper. He's just throwing the ball high and saying either Omar catches it or nobody does, because you can't lead him there. There's one of the worst mistakes a quarterback can make in that part of the field is a line drive throw, because you don't know what's coming from behind. Think about remember Brady Quinn used to hit that throw a lot at Notre Dame to Mo Stovall and Samardzija, and the ball was always high because you need to get it over the defense and let him go up and make a play. Yep.
From Sign.
That's the one we already got to. Sorry.
From J Melvin 22, Coach, do you think Alabama is going to start taking major steps back in the coming years and will start to be viewed similarly to how Notre Dame was after Lou left? Used to be really good.
Yes and no. Do I think Alabama is taking steps back and will continue to take steps back? Yeah, I do. Unless I thought Kalen DeBoer was going to adapt to a degree of his style to fit being in a place like Bama. And he's treated Bama like they're Fresno in Washington, where they've got to outsmart people to win football games. I'm disappointed in that. But I also don't think they're going to be what they were after Lou left. Because remember, after Lou left, Notre Dame had more losing seasons the next 7 years than they had winning seasons. They're not going to be that. They're going to have a lot of years like this past year, disappointing 9-3 season. Maybe the occasional 8-4. I don't see them being like 1 year they're 9-3, the next year they're 5-7. I don't see that. The talent's too good, and he's not that bad of a coach. Even there, he hasn't been that bad of a coach. I don't know that he could have done a worse job coaching for what his standard is, for his standard, than what he did last year, and they went 9-3. Same with this year.
Yeah. And with the portal and NIL, the way that it is, they're always going to be able to supplement their roster in a way to where I just don't see them having a losing season. I don't.
Yeah. Agree.
From Acupuncture, last offseason, Kingston Viliamasa gets a haircut and has a monster season. The great one gets a haircut.
I did not see that Jaden got a haircut. I did not see that.
Well, I think he's asking, like, does he?
Oh, like, well, number one, no, absolutely not. Because number one, Kingston was very good this year. I wouldn't exactly call 7.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks in 11 games a monster season. It's a very good season, kind of what we thought he could be as a sophomore, and he's on verge to become a star, but I wouldn't call it a monster season yet. But look how his season ended. So if we're going to have him get a haircut to replicate Kingston's season, then no thank you, because Kingston's season ended with a injured knee, and I don't say that flippantly. I'm just like, look, no, I mean, it's not. I also watched Jaden Greathouse go off in the semifinals and championship game with long hair, so I don't really care what he does with his hair as long as it doesn't interfere with his ability to play football. And Jaden's got really light hair. Like, you can see how it moves. It's not heavy. So I don't think it's like he's got curls and all that. You know what I mean? So I don't think it's like heavy where it's like, dude, your head probably weighs an extra 8 pounds because of all the flipping hair you got on your head. I don't think that's an issue with Jaden. I don't.
Nope. From Zach Weber, any word or any world where CJ comes back, even after a great season, just to create a better fit at the next level? Sane, Moore, Manning, Maeva, Sellers, Levitt, Mateer, Sorsby, Lagway, Nico, and Mensa.
Yeah, same thing I do. I'm like, I'll read a bunch of last names and I get to him and I'm like, Nico, and then Nico. You know, of course, you got Nico there too. And, yeah, same thing, dude. Same thing. I totally get it. I don't know that I would say that, like, I don't think it's a given that CJ is going to go pro after the season. I think if you're Notre Dame, you have to prepare for that inevitability. You don't want to get caught like, oh, wow, CJ went out and won the Heisman and we won the championship or made the championship game and now he's going pro. We're screwed. What are we going to do? We thought he's going to be here for one more year. You have to prepare for that. And then if he decides to come back, you bring him back and win another championship. I think there's a world in which if Marcus Freeman's back in 2027 and Notre Dame doesn't win a championship, that CJ Carr can come back in 2027 and want to win a championship, knowing that his game still has room for improvement. His body still has room for improvement. He's a junior. He's a true junior this year. So, there's some statistics out there about quarterbacks with like less than 28 starts and how successful they are. Well, if Notre Dame gets a bye next year and wins a championship, CJ is going to be at 27 starts.
Yeah.
Is that one fewer start going to be the difference in him winning a championship or not? I don't know. Just like if he plays a first-round game and doesn't get a bye and plays 16 games and he's got 28, is that one extra game the difference in him being ready for the NFL or not? Those are somewhat arbitrary standards. It really comes down to, does CJ feel he's ready for the National Football League or not? And does his agent and does his advisors, and then does the NFL view him as such? I mean, if they're talking about Ty Simpson being a first-round draft pick, I mean, goodness gracious, CJ Carr is going to be a much higher. I mean, he was better than Ty Simpson this year.
Agreed.
He was much better than Ty Simpson. What's he going to be next year? So I think part of it depends, Zach, on how the season goes. And I think the other part of it is, how does he view himself? I don't think all those guys are going to be going to the pros next year. I'll be shocked if Julian Sands in the draft next year. I don't think he'll, I just don't see it. Dante will, Arch Manning might, Maeva will. He's not as good of a quarterback as CJ Carr. Neither's Lenore Sellers. Neither's Sam Levitt. Neither's John Mateer. Sorsby, I'm very curious how he's viewed by NFL scouts. Nico's not better than him. Mensa, we'll see how he does at Miami. And then DJ Lagway's got all the tools in the world. Major injury concerns. And his game has been very average. Honestly, other than Arch and Dante, none of those other guys are going to – if CJ has the development that I think he's going to have, I don't think any of those other guys challenge him for CJ for number one. It'll be, I think, between him, Dante, and Arch is, I think, who are the top contenders, in my opinion, for being the top quarterback pick next year.
Well, and a dark horse that wasn't even listed here was Josh Hoover, who just went to Indiana. I mean, that's somebody that could be in the mix too. But look, here's my 2 cents on this, Zach. If CJ has the season that we think that he's going to have, there's a strong argument to be made that he's going to be better than every single quarterback that's listed on here. If that's a scenario, I'm not expecting him to come back, nor would, depending on what the season looks like, nor would I ask him to come back. It's going to be a very similar conversation to Jeremiah Love. If you're at the point where you think that you're ready and it's best for your future and your family's future, then take the opportunity.
Like if Notre Dame wins a championship next year and CJ is going to be the number one, number 2 overall pick, he's close to graduating. Like, what exactly do you have to prove?
Right.
You run a risk of getting over-evaluated. Now they nitpick every part of your game next year. You get injured. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that you could look at that. If he wants to come back, then you take him back. But I just think it depends on how the season goes.
Absolutely.
Zach said he didn't have enough characters for Hoover. But and I think Josh Hoover's a very good player. I don't know that Josh Hoover's going to be pushing those guys for the number 1 overall pick. So we'll see how it plays out. Got a little super chat from D Mork CN.
Appreciate the super chat with Marcus Freeman as head coach. Why do you think the defense was so bad game 1 and 2? With Mike Denbrock as offensive coordinator with experience at O-line coach, why was the run game plan not good?
Well, I don't think the run game plan was a problem against Miami. I think the execution of it was the problem. I keep saying that over and over and over again. There was one particular play where CJ pulls and throws a screen, and if he hands the ball off to Jeremiah Love, he's got a 40-something yard touchdown run. Jadarian had a long run. The run game, there's nothing Notre Dame was going to do scheme-wise in the opener that was going to work because their offensive line got their absolute butts kicked. And there's no, okay, we all got our call sheets, right? So I got my green notebook with all my great plays in it. Let me turn to the section of what my great play calls are when my offensive line's getting dominated. Here it is. This is my call sheet of plays that'll work when my offensive line is getting dominated. There's nothing. It's nothing. And when your offensive line stinks, it's amazing how your game plan doesn't look very good when your offensive line gets dominated. And it's funny how when your offensive line plays great and you're running the same exact game plan, all of a sudden your game plan looks great. I had one issue with Mike Denbrock in the opener, and that was that they didn't just stop calling RPOs on those run plays. It was clear that CJ didn't have a great read on it, and it was very clear that Miami was playing it. They were taking it away. So either do different ones. So if they're going to play that aggressively, bring some in-breaking RPOs. That was my issue. But I don't put a lot of stock in that. I'm not, but I'm also like, I mean, Mike Denbrock is not determining who is the run game coordinator and all that. And Marcus Freeman does. And again, I don't know that the scheme was going to matter. I don't love the run design. I did not love the run design this year at all. That's more of a Joe Rudolph thing, in my opinion, than a Mike Denbrock thing. But as Mike Denbrock is the OC, you've kind of got to figure out a way to get more out of him in that regard. But defensively, the big issue here is this, Trev. Marcus Freeman likes to coach his coaches the way he liked to be coached as an assistant, which is, you hired me to do a job, let me go do the job. And to a degree, I can respect that. But one thing he has to learn, is that it's like being a parent. And I'm looking at this obviously from the child point of view, because I don't have kids, but I know enough people that have kids, and I'm an uncle and all that. But like, you don't set rules for your kids and then say, okay, now go do it, and then you don't step in until they've been arrested. That's terrible parenting. You set a standard, and then you make sure you're on them that they live up the standard. And then as they show you that they're able to live up to that standard, then you give them a little bit more freedom to kind of go be themselves. And they get older and more mature and that kind of thing, right? Same thing here. You're hiring coaches from the outside who've not been a part of your program, of what Notre Dame does. you don't just turn it over to them and say, hope it works out. Here's the standard, hope it works out. You've got to know what the calls are. You've got to be there. And I just think sometimes Marcus Freeman gives his assistants who are new a little bit too much latitude. And he, like I said, he coaches them like he wanted to be coached. Well, they're not all you. You're the head coach. You've got to make sure that Chris Ash shows that he's capable of running your defense the way that it needs to be run before you just completely turn it over to him. You did that with Mike Denbrock the year before. So that was frustrating. That's a Marcus Freeman problem. Is same thing with Chancey Stuckey. Same thing with other guys who haven't necessarily quite lived up to expectations. You got to do a better job with new hires of making sure that they're doing what you want them to do and how you want them to do it. Then you turn them loose to go do their own thing. Because there was too much at stake in the first two games to not do it that way.
Agreed. Yep, I'm with you. From Casey MCC, how do you see the breakdown of the linebacker rotation of Osbury and Snead with KVA out for the start of the season?
Kind of like that right there. I think Drake Bowen's a starter. I would anticipate Jaden Osbury being the starter as well. Will. I think we'll see more of Madden Faremo at Mike.
Yep.
I think we could also see some of Madden as a edge rusher at times. I think we'll see Jalen Snead be in the rotation like he was this year. But I think the only big change is Madden Faremo taking those Mike reps from Kingston. And then all the Will reps are now only to Jaden and Jalen. Last year, it was those two plus Kingston. Now it's just those two. So that doesn't change a whole lot. Madden getting more Mike reps that Kingston would have got, and not quite as many as Kingston got, but he should get some of those. A, I want Drake to be fresh, and then B, it's good experience for Madden, especially like if you're beating a team, like if you're beating Rice bad at halftime, I'm still probably putting my first team defense on the field in the third quarter, but Drake's not going out there. Nope. I want to let Madden run this defense. And it's not because he's eventually going to take over for Drake this season. It's A, I need him to be ready in case something happens to Drake. And then B, this is Drake's last year, and that's our future. That's what they should have done with Drake in 2023.
Yeah.
And also I hope they do with Madden this year. And then the other change will be, I think you'll see more of Jalen Snead now on the third down sub packages and dime sub packages as a jack of all trades, pass rushing sometimes, dropping into coverage others. The role that Kingston had last year, I could see Jalen Snead getting a little bit of that as well.
Absolutely. From Jason Rose, Joe Rudolph's offensive lines at Notre Dame will be thought of as a group that puts dudes in the NFL but never reaches their full potential as an offensive line. I mean, as of right now, potentially, I mean, Joe Rudolph-led offensive lines have put what? Joe Alt in the NFL, Blake Fisher in the NFL, and some will remain to be seen. We'll see what happens with Emil Wagner and Billy Schrouth. I guess if this is a buy, sell, hold, I guess I would hold this, I suppose. That's kind of how I'm reading this question, Jason. This year is going to be big for Joe Rudolph. Like we've said, this is a prove-it year. Because if you can't get it done with this level of talent, then I'm not sure. You know, if you have NFL caliber talent, which they have by the boatload in this offensive line room right now, and you can't be reaching your full potential as an offensive line unit, then we have our questions. It's a different question with Marcus Freeman. I don't know, and I can't answer for him. But as things stand right now, I can't disagree with this because they've put more players in the NFL than they have put together full potential offensive lines. So as of right now, this is true. But if Notre Dame wants to reach their full aspirations as a team, then that has to change in 2026. From Jay Melvin, Coach, how hyped are you for spring ball with the matchups Notre Dame will have? Also, 247 has Notre Dame with a top 2 roster for 2026. Do they have the same expectation that Ohio State had going into 2024?
Yes. Yeah. You have arguably the best, and I would say they're in the top 2, and I like to steal this expression from Trev because it's very clever. They're in the top 2 and they're not second, in my opinion. So, yeah, that's absolutely the expectations. 100%. Yeah, you should be playing for the championship next year.
Yep. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Jinx. Trevor.
From From Springs Notre Dame '08, do we anticipate Coach Sider and Coach Brown using bigger and better rotations this season? I worry they won't use all of the talent they have stockpiled.
I do believe we will see that at receiver. I don't know that we'll see that at running back. I mean, Jaywan Sider has said flat out that he doesn't want to use more than two. He said that basically. I'm giving you the gist of what he said. That's not a direct quote. Mike Brown has said he'd like to have a deeper rotation publicly and privately, but I also don't think they're going to extend the rotation just to have it extended. They need guys that they trust. And for whatever reason, I just don't think they trusted KK the way that they trusted maybe Chris Mitchell the year before, coming off the bench, or Jaden Harrison the year before coming off the bench as part of the rotation. I mean, they ran a 5-man rotation at receiver in 2024. They ran basically a 3.5-man rotation in 2025.
Yep.
So, I mean, we've seen him run a deeper rotation. I just think he had more trust in the guys the year before than he did last year. Fair or not, and then part of that too was, Micah Gilbert keeps getting banged up. I mean, he caught the first touchdown pass of the season. They played him in the opener, and then he gets banged up again and didn't play great in a couple other games. But early in the season, they were playing 5. Then Jaden Greathouse got hurt. I mean, our issue wasn't that they didn't have a deep enough rotation. It was that they weren't using Jaden Greathouse enough. But, they played a 5-man rotation in the first 2 games because it was the 3 starters and then Will Pauling and then Micah Gilbert. I don't think Micah played great. He got banged up, and then KK is not. Then they added KK to the rotation a little bit more, but they didn't trust him the way that they did the other players. Fair, you can agree or disagree with that. That's not the thing I'm pointing to. But the plan last year was a 5-man rotation, and they carried that out until injury started kind of plaguing things a little bit.
Yeah. Spring. This is also a concern for me as well. More so running back than wide receiver, but from what we've seen the last 2 seasons from Mike Brown, is the receiver rotation has gotten smaller from 24 to 25. So hopefully that changes in 26. It's one of the reasons why I like the portal additions. So they didn't go out and get a 5th-year guy from Florida Atlantic. They didn't go out and get a 4-year guy from another ACC school. They went out and they got really high ceiling yet unproven talent. From Jim Halloran, Brian, you have often said Marcus Freeman coaches better when he's mad. Can he lead and coach mad for a year? I'd love to see it. Go Irish.
I've said angry, not mad. I think those are, to me, and how I view them, are slightly different. I may be wrong, but I kind of feel like the way I use mad is a little bit more emotional, a little bit more reactionary. Angry is more of a state of being that can be more properly used for motivation and discipline, and but yeah, I think you're meaning the same thing. But yes, I do think you can.
100%.
Because when I look at angry, it's kind of it can be because of a lot of different reasons, but it's more of this ain't happening again. And it just, everything you do is, we're not going to let that happen again. We're not going to let that happen again. We're not going to let that happen again. As opposed to mad, it's just more of you've offended me. I'm going to slap you. I'm mad. It's an emotional reaction. And then who knows what the consequences will be from that. Anger is more of okay, all right. You don't think I can do this? Cool. I'm going to leave your company, go start my own business, and go do this, 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 and this, and this.
Bang.
And that's the difference for me. Whereas mad is I yell at you in a staff meeting, walk out, and then I'm going back to work the next day.
Yeah. Angry is more of a mindset than being mad is the reaction piece. Agreed.
And I don't think that's hard to keep for a year. Because again, to me, that's not an emotional reaction. That's a state of being. There's been NFL players that have kept that mindset their entire careers. Tom Brady kept that chip on his shoulder of being a 6th-round draft pick for 20 years. So I think that's why I try to differentiate between mad, which to me is an emotional reaction to something, and anger, which is more of this is kind of, somebody just said Steve Smith Jr., Alec, 100% correct. Steve Smith Jr. still does things like he's a disrespected, because it's like, that was just who he was.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think angry, you can coach angry for an entire year. I think you can coach angry. I think that can just kind of be his state of being. And that doesn't mean you walk into the office every day yelling and screaming at people. That's not what anger is, because it's an outward trajectory. And so I do absolutely think that is. Yes. Yep. I love NH. Same state of being as the Hulk. Yeah. It's like that scene from the Avengers, like the first one, right? And Cap says to Hulk, to Banner, now'd be a good time to get angry. And Banner goes, "That's my secret, Cap. I'm always angry." But he knows when to kind of ramp it up and when to not. And then he just transforms, wham, you know what I mean? And Hulk, smash. You know what I mean? But like, yeah, it's a great one. Very well done, NH. She always comes correct with stuff like that, Trev.
Love it. From Jay Melvin, teams like Texas, Texas A&M, Florida, and maybe still Georgia to a degree are going to start taking over the SEC due to the rise of the NIL in football.
No, I mean, it's not about how much you spend, it's about how you spend it. So, no, I don't agree with that.
No, it's what's done with the talent that you bring in. I mean, as of right now, like you could still argue the SEC, even though they didn't make it the farthest in the playoff, the SEC still runs through Athens. They've run it in back-to-back. They've won it in back-to-back years. I mean, I'm not willing to say that Texas is going to take over the SEC until they can prove they can win a big game in the SEC.
And you can't talk about spending money on players and not have LSU in the conversation.
Yeah.
Alabama's not exactly a team unwilling to spend on players.
Yeah, Alabama's not really pinching pennies down there in Tuscaloosa.
Oklahoma's got a couple bucks. You know what I mean? Like,
got some.
Yeah.
Another one from Jay Melvin.
This is the last question, Trev.
Okay, right on. From Jay Melvin, curious to see the further development of Bryce Underwood in year 2. Coach, did you hear the story about him not having a quarterback coach? Sherrone Moore was a complete train wreck.
I've heard some weird things about that. Look, even if he had a quarterback's coach, that was a train wreck situation. There's a reason that Bryce Underwood, Trev and I talked about this during the season before we even knew the stuff that was going on in Michigan. Trev and I said multiple times, have you noticed how much better Bryce Underwood looked in the games where Sherrone Moore was suspended than he did in games where Sherrone Moore was the coach on the sidelines? Like, we talked about that last year, Trev. Like, that was not a new thing. That's something that, like, now it's like, okay, when you learn about how crazy everything was, you're like, oh, it makes sense now. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I get it now. And, look, the what is it? The bloom is off the rose a little bit, so to speak, for Sherrone Moore. I mean, for Bryce Underwood. People are now going to, because, like, look, man, there's nothing that people like more than to tear down someone who they built up. And that's kind of a little bit what's going on with Bryce Underwood. Now, look, I do think there's some things about Bryce that I look at him and I say, I don't know that Bryce was putting in the work that he needs to put in because he's too young to have that figure. You know what I'm saying? So I think there's some maturity for Bryce, but he was a flipping freshman in college. Like, I know I ate way too many pizzas my freshman year of college. You know what I mean? So, like, I think he needed a veteran presence as a young quarterback, and he didn't get that. He had a very immature, lost coach who was too busy dealing with his off-the-field drama, couldn't lead him. I think Kyle Whittingham was a tremendous hire for Bryce Underwood because he's going to bring stability. He's going to protect Bryce when he needs to protect him, but then also let him go play when he needs to let him go play. So I think that was great for Bryce. I'm glad he stayed. I'm glad he didn't jump in the portal. And I think it's going to be great for him. But there's a reason why he looked better in games when Sherrone wasn't around.
Yeah, we talked about that a lot. And we were throwing out really anything of like, hey, maybe Biff Poggi doesn't, necessarily value what Bryce Underwood's, NIL package was, like Sharon Moore did. Maybe that's why he was, pulling back the reins on him going out and being a true athlete. You could not have convinced me that was one of the reasons why.
Right.
But, I'm hoping to see him elevate in year 2. I mean, that's exactly what ESPN did with Arch Manning. They built him up for 7 months in the offseason. And then when he wasn't a Heisman contender after week 1, they were very quick to retract a lot of the things that they said about him and doubled back.
And we called that, Trev. We talked about that last year. We said they did the same thing with Deion Sanders. Why'd they hype up Deion 2 years ago? Because they wanted to kind of get the hype. They wanted to kind of get the clicks they could off the rise. But I said the people hyping up Deion now are going to be the first ones tearing them down if things don't go their way. That's exactly what happened. Same thing with Bryce Underwood. And look, Michigan has done some good things in the portal. They went out and got Jamie French. It's a very talented young player from there. They got some good players coming in the high school ranks. They bring back some of their top guys. I mean, they still got to rebuild the roster around him. But Travis Johnson, I think, can help them as a freshman. I think Jamie French can come in and play for them. They got J.J. Buchanan, the tight end from Utah, that came in with, obviously with Kyle Winningham. So I think he'll have a little bit of a better supporting cast around him. Obviously, not having Justice Haynes hurts, but I think they'll be fine. I mean, Jordan Marshall comes back. He didn't transfer; he stayed, correct? So I think he'll be fine next year. But I just think people expected too much of him as a freshman with no supporting cast in the pass game, and little did we know kind of what else they were dealing with as a football team with that guy leading the program. So Bryce will be fine. Somebody in the chat said he's overrated. He was overrated from the standpoint of they acted like he was this generational talent. I did not think that. He was not Trevor Lawrence, who I looked at and was like, that's a generational talent. Ronald Curry is generational talent. Arch was not. Quinn Ewers was not. Bryce Underwood was not. CJ Carr was not. Those aren't generational talents, big picture-wise. They put way too much on Bryce early on because of their own hype. Same thing if Quinn Ewers was a 3-star player coming out of high school, the narrative about him would be completely different than it was when he was the highest ranked player ever. Well, that was your fault, not his.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Bryce will be fine. He's got a lot to learn. He's a raw quarterback, but he's got a lot of tools. And he'll benefit from some of the mess he went through this year if Winningham can just make sure that they kind of get his head on straight, which I think it will. He'll be fine.
100%. Super chat from Gavin Schmavin. Appreciate you. Are we going to see 2 back formations this year?
I hope so. With Kedron Young, it's kind of be dumb not to do that at least a little bit if he's healthy.
Yeah, I'm hoping so. Not willing to bet the house on it. I mean, I thought we were going to see more 2 back formations with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, but I think they're going to be a predominantly 11 personnel team this year. And then once you start factoring, it's like, okay, let's say you put Kedron Young on the field with Aeneas or vice versa. Who are you taking off the field? Mm-hmm. You're going to take off one of the receivers. Are you going to take off one of the tight ends? I'm not sure. I would like to, but I'm not. If we didn't see it with 4 and 24 and more of a variety, I don't know if we're going to see it more with Kedron and Aeneas.
I want to see it at times, especially in the red zone. There's some merit to it, but like you said, Trev, their most loaded position group is still going to be tight end this year, or wide receiver this year. So, yeah, good stuff. Good one, Gavin Schmavin. Well, Trev, that'll do it.
Almost brought a tear to my eye saying tight end. I thought, oh, man. Oh, it's okay. No, folks, that's going to do it for us here today on the Irish Breakdown podcast, but don't worry, we will be back tomorrow. Brian, tomorrow, buy, sell, hold, correct?
Yes. So we're going to have our schedule this week is buy, sell, hold tomorrow. So I need Salty to put that up now. Sorry, I forgot to send him that email yesterday. Actually, I'll probably just go put it on the board. And then Wednesday, Thursday, we'll have normal shows. And then Friday, we'll do a mailbag. And then next week, we're going to start our Monday buy, sell, holds, Friday mailbag. The reason we didn't do it this week is because we wanted to be able to preview the title game today and do all that kind of stuff. So we thought the timing of it. So, yeah, buy, sell, hold tomorrow.
Love it. Well, folks, on your way out of here, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Until tomorrow, we'll be back for Buy, Sell, Hold. That's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.